hopefully it was easier to get here because of the great work of our utilities group, our street guys, and everybody else that helped clear the streets. It's been a long night for them. John told me today they just got done filing and got a call at 5 o'clock in the morning to fix a major water leak. So they've been out on the road for quite a while. So get a chance, express your appreciation. We sure to express our appreciation on behalf of the city. We'll start our meeting tonight with the thought and pledge of allegiance, or an invocation, whatever council member Swanson decides he'd like to do. Since he's on the agenda for this evening, this being our first meeting in December, it's been a while since we've been together. So, council member Swanson, didn't mean to surprise you, but take it away.
I don't have a thought, so I guess I'm praying.
Pray for a thought.
Heavenly Father, we're grateful for the opportunity to meet together. We're thankful for the wonderful city in which we live, for the great freedoms that we enjoy. Thankful for the men and women who serve our city so well and who are working so diligently to keep our roads clean and safe. We ask for a spirit of civility as we discuss matters of the city this night. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen.
Amen.
You please stand and follow me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
one nation under God,
indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, council member Swanson. Appreciate that. And we welcome all of you who are in attendance with us tonight and those who are online with us. So John, if you keep an eye on that for us. We're going to start tonight. We have 3 presentations. We'll start with the Kiwanis Club. Bob, we'll give you your allotted time.
Bob Buswell, 962 East, 3025 North Ogden. I'd like to thank the council for letting us, the Kiwanians, take some time to explain what we do as a club here in North Ogden and ask for your ideas, if any, about what we can do to help the city, mainly the youth of North Ogden. Dave Haddock went to a meeting at Park City on November 5th and got some good ideas from about 25 Kiwanians. We used to give books to elementary schools. Now we give Chromebooks to the Weber County Foundation. We do Cherry Days breakfast each year. It is our largest moneymaker. We adopt about 60 blocks of Washington Boulevard for cleanup. 9 Kiwanians did this last time. We meet at the Pizza Pie Cafe by Kurt's Drive-In. The Youth Council helps with this. A couple of years ago, we helped with getting drinking fountains by the North Ogden Elementary School. We do Sub for Santa for 3 families. And the North Ogden Police also do 3 families. We have donated a TV for the Northview Senior Citizen Center. John Reynolds, a member of Kiwanis, has young people write up essays for Freedom Foundation and have winners and give them some money. We have done this for some time, but not 2 years ago because of the COVID. We do an Easter egg hunt for about 350 to 400 children. Roger Shute does Hope of America awards for student recognition. 1 or 2 Kiwanians go to elementary schools in Weber County and explain what we do as a club and award $25 to some students. We do this in April or May each year, about 10 schools. We would like you to suggest anything more we can do to help the community, especially the youth. We are wondering if you know how we can use some of our funds if necessary for the community. We would like our membership to grow. Both men and women can be in the club. If you as a council know anyone who will be interested in joining us to assist North Ogden in some way, let us know. I'm gonna turn some time over to Dave Haddock. And then anyone else that wants to mention something, and then we'd like the councilman and the councilwoman to give us feedback on how we can help. Then after the councilmen get through talking, we as Kiwanis, we're gonna please excuse us, we're gonna go over to the Northview Senior Citizen Center and fill up 3 boxes of food for families. Dave?
Same name and address, is that the procedure? Okay. I'm Dave Haddock, I live in North Ogden. I've been in the Kiwanis Club for about 10 years. I joined after I was in Boy Scouts for most of my life. And then I had a stroke, and so I couldn't quite do Boy Scouts much anymore, so I joined Kiwanis. I thought it would be interesting for you to just listen to what we do, what Kiwanis is. It's an international organization, and this is what it says. At Kiwanis, we are generous with our time, creative with our ideas, passionate about making a difference, and we have fun along the way. It says kids are curious, lovable, and hilarious. They're also wild, impatient, and vulnerable. Kids need people to look out for them, so Kiwanis is there in every part of the globe. So that's our main emphasis, is kids. But then when we get down here, it says, what are we? We're member driven, we're community focused, and the members choose the club meeting frequency, leaders, and the projects by examining what members want and what the community needs. Frankly, most of us are a little over the hill, and so we're not really active in the community much anymore, and that's why we wanted to come to you to get some ideas of where you think we could maybe devote some time and effort and make a difference. We want to be a vital part of our community. And so that's what we're working for. Maybe after here, we will go and talk to the schools. We've had a little bit of difficulty with some of the past high school principals, such as Fremont and Weaver. They have not wanted to do the Kiwanis Ski Clubs. And that is a service club that we set up for the youth. I think the problem was in order to do that, they have to have one of their staff members assigned to help out the club and help point them and get them organized. We support them with funds. If they don't have the money to join Kiwanis, we help pay that. We help pay for things they want to do. And so it's a good service organization. And somehow the past principals haven't had the mind to do that. But my understanding now is, I brought this up and talked to one of our club members who was an educator and said, this is what we're planning on doing. He hasn't been with us for a couple of months. And he immediately came back and said, hey, there's a lot of problems in the schools. We've got some really poor kids. We've got needs for pantries in the schools for kids to get food and before and after school. And so I'm thinking maybe that's kind of the area we might look at. And I don't know whether you have anything else that you think. So basically, do you have any questions of me?
Dave, first of all, on behalf of the council and the city, let me express our appreciation for what you do and your passion for helping children. They're going to grow up to be us one day. And well, we hope some of them don't grow up to be like us. Some of them.
Maybe some of
Now,
us.
if they all grow up to be like, these three here, excluding Councilmember Swanson and myself,
Right.
could be a success. And the two on the end, but you can exclude us. I did have one idea that we've been thinking about, at least I have been. We do have a lot of kids in the school who would like to participate in extracurricular activities. The fees have got pretty expensive, frankly, for these kids. So, you know, John and myself have talked about how can we create maybe a scholarship program that would qualify, you know, with certain qualifications where we could assist them. I think we're all believers that participation in recreational activities and other extracurricular activities creates teamwork and camaraderie and really helps them kind of have something to do other than create mischief. So that's one idea I had with maybe the Kiwanis Club could coordinate with the city.
Thank you.
And we could maybe do some type of scholarships to help some kids who would like to participate that don't have the ability.
Good.
Just one thought.
Okay, we'll write that down. And we're welcome from thoughts from any quarter. We won't necessarily run off and do those right away, but we will mull them over, find out what fits, check them out, and then make decisions which way to go.
We also have, John, correct me if I'm wrong, 5 pages in the Connection magazine every month. Is that correct?
Yes.
We'd be more than happy, I think, to try to get some publicity there, help you with some membership drives, whatever we can do there, because I do believe that it's a worthy cause.
Okay.
Just
One of the things that the Kiwanis International is doing to try to build up our members is they're going into the various clubs and in their zip codes or general areas. They're doing some Facebook pointed advertising, and they organized a brand new club up in Idaho with this just a month or two ago. And so they've got, again, quite some growth. And so that's what we're trying to do. And we're trying to get them to decide where to go to get expertise to join our club to help us with areas that we make a final decision to go on to. So,
And in the meantime, it might be good to come in and follow up. We can discuss as a council some additional ideas. You know, I don't like volunteering our staff without talking to them, but we do have some expertise that there may be some availability to at least get you started with some Facebook things. So come in and talk to us, and well, let's see if we can help them too.
okay, thank you.
Council, any other thoughts?
Right. As you were talking about Key Club, I think it would be a fabulous idea if you could have some teachers nominate some students that members of the Kiwanis, you know, our adult Kiwanis Club could mentor these students and get them excited about, you know, the idea of the service and, you know, everything that Kiwanis stands for. Then you can generate some passion at an early age. They can, you know, they can go to the principal and say, we want this club. Right. And then hopefully when they grow up into adulthood, they're ready to join and grow your numbers that way too. So just the thought I had.
Thank you. Councilmember Swanson, did you have a?
First, a thank you for Weaver School Foundation. We're always grateful for the donations that Kiwanis gives to the foundation, and you know that helps a lot of really good things happen. There's also in that same spirit is the Ogden Valley Adaptive Sports Foundation that I can help get you in contact with. And they specialize in helping the disabled youth and adults, but mostly it's youth, participate in winter and summer sports activities, skiing, water skiing, all kinds of fun stuff. So I'm sure there's opportunities for your group to serve there as well, and we can connect and I can help you get in touch with them.
Thank you.
I think, you know, we're on an effort to make all of our parks accessible to those who have,
Absolutely.
don't have access. You and I share a common interest there. And we want to make sure our parks are all accessible to those who are in chairs, etc. Just some ideas, and we'll toss around and open up any comments as you think about it.
I think Bob is here normally.
Yeah.
So you can always,
Yep.
send him with some ideas and give him tasks to do.
Perfect.
He likes to do that.
Good. Thanks. Anything else before we close up? We've got it. Bob?
I didn't realize that Chris Backery, our president's here, and he's gonna say a couple words. He always has something to say.
All right.
Chris Patrick, I wanted to just mention a couple things that may not have been mentioned before. I know that Dave said most of our members are over the hill, and that may be true. Some of us are under the hill. I happen to work in mortuary service, so that, pardon the pun, but the reality is that we are diverse, and we have been around for 100 years. Kiwanis actually comes from an Ojibwe Native American word, which is Yiwanitsa, which means we make noise. And it just, I bring that up to say that we've been here for a long time, so we're not going anywhere, and we've adapted, and we will continue to do that. And I want everybody to know that may be paying attention to this, that anybody, any age, we have need of people. And sometimes people aren't able to make it to all of our meetings, but they're on our books and a contributing member, and they come several times a year even. And so we just want you to know that we can be flexible. People have busy lives, busy schedules, but there's ways to contribute, ways to participate. And there's a diverse amount of us. I just want to say that Kiwanis changed my life. I'm really grateful to be a member of the club. I accidentally joined Kiwanis. That's a story for another time. I didn't even know what it was, but it is John Reynolds' fault. So now we've used his name in vain twice tonight, but I love it. I love the association. I love the people. I love what we get to do for our youth. So just a final plug. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else? Thanks for coming and joining us tonight. And if you need to be excused, we'll surely do so. Thank you. We'll move on to item number 2, which is a presentation on some survey software that council has kind of bounced back for several years on how we can get input from our residents more often and help us in the decision-making process. So if Kevin Lyons is here, is Kevin? He's on.
Should we hit that?
All right, Kevin.
Hey there.
Oh, I need to turn that speaker.
Can you hear us, Kevin?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can. I had the speaker on mute, so.
Okay, excellent.
John, you want to kill that light?
All right, Kevin, go ahead.
Okay, well, thank you all. Good evening, everyone, and thanks for making the time to talk a little bit about survey software and particularly scientific survey software that's now affordable and easy and fast. That's basically what we do. But in the interest of kind of giving you a little more detail and getting you thinking about it, of course, ask questions at any time. I've got some slides for you, and I think you were giving me screen share. And let me know if you have my screen.
Yep.
Yep. Okay, terrific. All right, so you should have full screen now.
Yep.
Good to go?
Yes, we're good.
Excellent. All right. So yeah, so I'm Kevin Lyons. I am a co-founder of FlashVote, and as you can see, it's a scientific way to survey and engage communities. You can basically think of it as a way to get true representative, generalizable community input in 48 hours. And we work with cities, counties across the country, including a bunch in Utah. The best way to think about it is with a question we like to ask, some of the challenges you probably have. So if you guys had to guess, how often do you think the public input sentiment you get, whether it's in person or emails, social media, online surveys, phone calls, all that stuff, How often do you think that matches the whole community sentiment that's not there? Anyone want to take a guess? Throw out a percentage, make it kind of fun.
Is there such thing as a negative percentage?
Okay, so that's pretty good. So no one has ever gone negative. 0 we've gotten, but okay, so a little higher number maybe is a guess, so we can do an over under. Now that I'm living in Nevada, it's a thing we do. Yeah,
20%.
20%. Okay, cool. So I can still see you guys. Anyone want to take over 20% as a guess?
5%.
5% as a guess. Okay, so if I do the under 20%, some hands to 5%. Yeah. Okay, a few. Yeah, how many don't know? How many have no idea, by the way? Like, not sure is a great answer. Yay! We always include that in our survey questions. So I can tell you what we did. We went and looked at our first 300 scientific surveys, scientific community surveys, and we compared them to data that cities, counties had from all these things. What did they believe based on the data they had? And it was about 5% of the time. So one of you guys nailed it. That it was a match, that it was the same side and amount of
At the presentation.
sentiment. And then about 25% of the time, and this won't surprise you either, you had a smaller group that felt larger. Like it was louder, but not all the way to be a majority of the public input sentiment. And then about 70% of the time, what people were hearing, seeing was the opposite of what the whole community wanted. So again, maybe none of this is surprising to you. Guessing negative is a good sign though, right? So that's a challenge. And to make that a little more tangible, we have a case study we were involved in Harvard. They had a bunch of grad students, all these folks up here, who went to a bunch of meetings, created an online survey, did a bunch of stuff to help a town in Massachusetts figure out how to do a community center. And so the first thing they did is have a few meetings, and people came and they talked about what was most important to them to have in a new community center. The big winners here, you can see above the above the red line, the 50% line, study meeting and event space, health and social services. So that was the in-person meeting data. So picture yourself at this meeting, and I do too. I've been a public official now for 9 years, monthly meetings, county advisory board, and you have the people coming to you. So they didn't stop there. They said, yeah, we definitely want to do an online survey. And so they did that too, and they pushed it out, and lo and behold, they got the same results, right? I mean, honestly, you got to be pretty persuaded by this, right? At this point. So then they had us do a scientific survey. And it turns out that 2 of the items were the opposite. Actually, 3 were. 1 was flipped from low to high, 2 were flipped from high to low. So the real thing that people are sports. And coincidentally, that looks like the data you just saw. But the big challenge there in all those is, in person is a certain type of people. This was older, more retired. The social media survey was a different set of people, younger, more female. But neither one of those are really the problem and the challenge of all this, and the reasons that their conclusion was traditional methods of community input are biased in certain ways. It really comes down to something that's really clear if you think of an online survey. So this is a community also in Massachusetts. They were doing a community center upgrade, and they did an online SurveyMonkey, and 85% of people said they would pay $100 a year for the community center. So they happened to sign up with us and duplicate the question. It turned out the real answer was 33%. And what was going on there, you can probably visualize it now if you think of it. So the people who are most interested in the topic, they follow it, they find out about the survey, they take it at a much higher rate than regular people because they're interested in it, and then they'll share it with their friends, and usually on the same side of an issue one way or another. And that's the kind of thing that they do that to organize to come to meetings. They do that, they rally on social media, they do it online surveys. And that's really what's going on. Ultimately, If you think of your community as a giant bell curve of people on any issue, who do you think you hear from, unfortunately, most of the time?
The tails.
The tails, exactly, yeah. And people who are really interested in it or really hate it, and these people are actually slightly more motivated usually, unfortunately. And what does that tell you though? Like this is who you hear from over here. I mean, naturally, you're going to think this, right? Like, oh, I guess everyone hates this. I mean, I've fallen for that even when I've seen the email go around town. You know, you react as a human, but it could always be this. And so the real challenge here is the influence, because when you're getting yelled at, it's not fun. It feels terrible. Like you feel the pressure without that other data. And that's why you need to hear from the many and not just the noisy. And ultimately, that is what we do for you. Questions on the why so far? I'll get into the how real quickly and then as well. Make sense?
Mhm.
All right, terrific. Yeah, so basically that's why we created Flashvote, to provide you an alternative, to bring the whole community into the room instead of just the folks who are the most interested in the topic. Statistically valid community input in 48 hours. And we pioneered an approach. Traditional scientific surveys are random sample, but that's become harder in the last 20 years. Used to be able to get a 60% response rate calling people. Take a guess what it is now. You do a phone survey. Negative again? Yeah. It's like a 1%. So that means that you have that problem where people might find out about the topic and then participate or not, even though you've randomly picked them. So we pioneered the idea of a survey panel locally in 2013. And that means step one is we get regular people first with no topic as bait, and then we start asking them questions later. So we work with you to push stuff out through your channels. We can send our own messages, including SMS messages or postcards. And you'll note, by the way, on anything printed, we have a phone number. So it's not just a tech thing. It really is. How do you make it easy for people to participate by email, web, or text, or phone call only even? Then when people sign up, we capture some basic demographics. So we never have to survey. Keeps the survey short. This 1 minute a month we ask, right? Do you have 1 minute a month to help make North Ogden better? And that's that left brain, right brain, no topic. Those folks who participate give us info. About 90% of them also give us a address, which we can make sure it's in your community, make sure it's within a particular service district or quadrant or electoral district, whatever it is. And once we have that built, now we're onto the questions and the surveys, and you have a topic, we work with you on that, create the questions that are tailored for what the residents know. What can we pull out of their brains that can be helpful to you? And there's a ton of things we do for quality control, up to 23 different things now. Ultimately, it comes down, how do we make easy for them to understand, answer, respond, and give you useful information? And we've invested heavily, many years, millions of dollars in automation to make it extra affordable. So once that survey launches, your work is done. We collect the data, report it, and you're good to go. And just to put perspective, scientific panels are relatively new. We were a year ahead of Pew Research as one of the national firms like Gallup. And for them, within 4 years, they went from not doing them all to being most of their data. And for us, we've now just been pushing it out there, growing, and we're in about 25 states, actually almost 30 now, I think, including several in Utah. So questions, how it works, why it works, anything. And of course, I have some examples I can show you as well.
Council, any questions? I think it's been a good explanation, but if you have questions.
Thanks.
I don't
Anyone
see-
want to see a survey from another city in Utah?
Yeah. I'd like to
Bill's
see
got a
some.
question, Councilman.
Okay.
Kevin, when you gave me this presentation with John a couple of weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, you went through a couple of examples that were very informative of how the survey. I'd love for you to go through one of those if you would, please.
Sure, you bet. We actually have a new one since we talked with you. Actually, Sandy City did their first survey. I got a couple here from Utah. I have others too teed up. So it's really helpful to see the results, I think, like you're saying. Can you still see the screen as it's switched?
It hasn't loaded the new screen yet. It's still on the slide.
All right. I might have to adjust that setting. Oh, it looks like it's stuck on that. Okay. Let me drop the screen share and come right back to you. And think of questions in the meantime, if you don't mind. All right, one sec here. Okay. There we go. Okay, do we have my screen back?
There we go.
Yep, okay, super. Yeah, so build the panel, create the survey, approve it, you guys, our QC team, everything, and then we're ready to go. And what you can see when the survey ends 48 hours later is a results page. And people love you for this, by the way. We make that transparent. It's part of the process. And in fact, if they participate, we'll send them a courtesy email with a little text summary, but also a link to the page. And on this page, we have the drop-down menu. The fancy word is crosstabs, but basically it's just filters that allow you to see the results by different categories. And they're really informative sometimes. This was a survey. They were just basically looking to prioritize a fire station versus public works versus a rec center. And what they were hearing was that the rec center was super important to people. Now, if you can see this, do a table view. What did the public actually think? Fire station, yeah. And going away. And then we actually did a follow-on question there to even drill down into the willingness to pay for this. And, you know, compare the willing to pay the extra money, 20 a year or not. And pretty overwhelming there. Well over 3 to 1, almost 4 to 1. And the public works was kind of more of a mixed bag. But each question, in addition to having the locals only filter, which is the default for people that have provided an address that is in your city, we also have things like age groups, male, female, council districts. And what was interesting here, I don't know how well any of you guys know Sandy City, but take a guess where the rec center is. Which district do you think the rec center is in?
Can't see the map.
I don't think we can see it good enough.
Okay, let me blow it up a little too. So this is the center choice right here, the people who think want that to be a priority. You got District 1.
District 3
wants the rec center.
District 3 is where the rec center is located. Yeah. So that gives you a sense for the granularity that the data is really good for, because it's designed not to be like a political poster and do all these fudge factors and give you one number. It's designed to be decision support. And you guys have to make the decision. I want to give you as much information as possible to help you understand exactly what you're doing and what's going to deliver the most value. And frankly, what they learned from this is, oh yeah, if we're going to do a rec center, we need to deliver more value to the other 3 districts. And they've already started talking about that and thinking about that. So that's one example, and you can see, in fact, it actually is located right around here, turns out. Okay, yeah, and then the other thing about these is we do multiple choice questions, but also open-ended. So I would blank, and people can answer whatever they want. And there's good stuff in here sometimes. Actually, you know, think of it like a needle in a haystack, but sometimes there's gems in here. It's like mining for gold. You can see, what did people say about a dime? Nickel and dime to death, not going to pay a dime, right? That makes sense. Could have guessed that. And then we also have, in this case, we did a full spectrum on the rec center, who's willing to pay. And sure enough, that group showed up. We also end each survey with an open-ended question. We learned this from testing with residents, which is, hey, any other comments or suggestions? Again, this is where there's some gold in there. Also, you know, all kinds of ideas, maybe ideas you didn't have, facts you didn't know, questions you hadn't asked. And it's all there, easy for you to poke around at your convenience. We also do debriefs on your surveys as well. Is that helpful? Kind of what you were hoping to see?
Any other questions, council?
Sounds good.
I think, Councilmember Swanson, you and John probably talked about what the cost of this would be on an annual basis.
Right.
So at some point in time, as we discuss this further, we can either include it in next year's budget or make a budget amendment if the council feels this is appropriate. Let me just quickly take a survey of the council on who'd like to pursue this a little bit further.
Mayor, before you do that, I think it's important to understand too, that unlike the, a couple of years ago, we had a bid that came in that was for a single survey.
Yeah.
Right, it was like $13,000 for a single survey. The cost with flash vote is significantly less than that on an annual basis. And it includes, Kevin, remind me, up to 5 or 6 surveys annually?
Yeah, up to 6 surveys. And we
surveys
have that as
annually.
just as kind of an expectation setter. So most people do 2 to 5. And yeah, it's less than the cost of 1 survey for a year. If you want to do 7, that's great. We'll just give you a high 5. But most people do 2 to 5 because there's a ton of data in each survey.
Sure. Okay, Councilman Barker, would you like to pursue this a little bit further?
We just heard in-person surveys weren't very effective, but yes.
Okay, Councilmember Delphi.
As long as the cost is reasonable, I think it sounds great.
Okay, Councilmember Ekstrom, yes.
Yes.
Councilmember Swanson. All right, looks like we'll investigate this further and make a decision, and appreciate your presentation and information. So thank you for joining us tonight.
All right. Well, appreciate you guys, your time and interest very much, and have a great rest of your meeting.
Thank you very
Thanks,
much.
Kevin.
Thank you, Kevin.
Take care. Nice to meet y'all. Bye.
Councilmember Barker, you want to take the next item?
Yeah, so we have Tessa, I hope I say her last name, Basham. She's the executive director of the Davis Arts Council. She's going to present on amphitheaters and arts guilds, I think. And Davis, I mean, she knows a lot more about this than I do.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. Hello, North Ogden City Council. Thank you so much for having me today. And thank you for being flexible. I had really hoped to be there in person, but I live on the bench in Bountiful and I drive a Toyota Yaris. So I appreciate having the Zoom option. I am Tessa Vashel. I'm the executive director of the Davis Arts Council located in Layton. And this is home to the Kenley Amphitheater, an 1,800 seat outdoor amphitheater. We have hosted hundreds of concerts and cultural events in our 28 years of operation. And we operate in partnership with Layton City. And just this past summer, we welcomed over 30,000 patrons. So I was asked to speak today a little bit about the work we do and how we do it. I am definitely going to be speaking in broad strokes and generalizations. There will probably be exceptions to almost everything I say because this is a huge topic. I could probably teach an entire college class on this topic, but I am happy to answer additional questions that may come up. I'm planning to briefly touch today on basically the operational model that exists, how in the entertainment industry, these concert venues and cultural facilities operate, the costs associated with these types of shows and the types of shows that there are, and also what the planning process is like and a kind of day of show timeline. I am going to be focusing on concerts specifically for this conversation. A lot of this is transferable to other types of cultural events though. So diving right in, first of all, looking at the big picture, venues, a venue is, any location such as the Kenley Amphitheater where a cultural event can happen. Venues can also be operated by their owner, but often a venue is owned by one entity and then programming is produced by another entity or organization through either an exclusive or non-exclusive agreement. And in many cases, in the case of a concert, this third party is called a promoter, and the promoter's job is to arrange for bringing in the artist and making everything happen for the concert itself. If you look in the area, we have many peer organizations that operate on a wide variety of models. Some are entirely privately owned, and they are owned and operated by the same entity. Ogden Sarah Shell is an example of this. Some are owned and operated by their government. Sandy City Amphitheater, until a couple years ago, was an example of this. They've recently started contracting an outside promoter more frequently. And then you have organizations like Davis Arts Council and the Kenley Amphitheater in Layton. So Davis Arts Council is an independent 501c3 nonprofit. We are not a subsidiary or affiliate of Layton City or of Davis County, and instead we operate on our own. The Kenley Amphitheater is owned by Layton City, and we are the official arts partner of Layton City. And as part of our agreement, in being their official arts partner, we provide arts and culture events for the residents of Layton City and Davis County, specifically in the Kenley Amphitheater, but also throughout the area. We've been doing this. We were originally started in 1979, and the Kenley Amphitheater was built in 1995. So coming up on 28 years of operation now. Putting on these shows is definitely a big undertaking. So as one is looking at, bringing in a concert, trying to make something like this happen, one of the biggest things that's going to influence the types of artists and tours that you're able to bring in is the size of your venue. Specifically determined by the number of seats or the capacity. So a 500 seat capacity is different from a 2,000 is different from a 10,000, is different from a 60,000. And these are all going to be bringing in different levels of artists. Thinking of somebody who has recently played at Rice-Eccles Stadium, they are not going to be playing at the Syracuse City Amphitheater anytime soon. If you're trying to get kind of a ballpark figure of an artist that's a good fit for a venue you're working with, looking at what they have played recently helps. And as a general rule of thumb, any artist who has played at a venue that is more than about 2 to 3 times your capacity in the last 3 to 5 years is probably going to be out of your league. That's the rule of thumb that I try to stick to when I'm trying to see if an artist is possible for us. So for example, we are, like I said, an 1,800 seat theater. So looking at artists who might be possible for us, if their average number of tickets sold is higher than about 5,000 or 6,000, then I consider them to be unattainable, and it's not necessarily worth the time to try and track this down. Another key thing after looking at the size is, who is your target demographic? And this is a question that you can answer really broadly. In our case, our target demographic is 55 to 75-year-olds, Layton residents and Davis County residents. We do welcome people who fall outside that demographic all the time, and occasionally we host concerts that fall outside of that demographic. But for the most part, that's what we're looking at when we're booking a season. Looking at something like the Ogden Twilight series, they're targeting a different demographic. They're targeting, I would guess, primarily people in their 20s and 30s, especially because it tends to be a standing room only venue. When you're looking at these artists and what you can expect to pay, these fees are going to vary really widely. And the way that the fees work can vary widely too. In some cases, there will be things like a split of the ticket costs. In other cases, it's a flat fee that's paid. In our case, for example, we deliberately keep ticket prices low, often below market value. And so we pay a flat fee to the artist because, it wouldn't be fair to them for us to set low ticket prices and then split with them. These flat fees, like I said, are going to vary really, really widely. Just to give you some kind of ballpark and idea. For us, the top tier artists, and we call these the legacy artists often, are going to be people like REO Speedwagon and Styx. And you're going to be looking in a range of about 100,000 to 150,000 for just the artist fee. People like Idina Menzel fall into that category. These are recognizable names, people that you've heard of. Just below that, we have mid-level artists who typically are going to have also been very popular, but perhaps hit a single demographic more than the general public. This is groups like America and Wilson Phillips. You're going to find in about the 50,000 to 100,000 fee range. Beneath that, you're going to get things like emerging artists that are kind of larger, or artists that fit a specific niche interest. And that would be artists like Pablo Cruz or Blue Oyster Cult in the 25,000 to 50,000 range. Below that, you have regional artists, tributes, smaller and emerging, or very niche artists. So for example, we had an almost Elton John tribute, and he was wonderful. And we had the Traveling McCurries, who are a bluegrass group. We had them the year that they won a Grammy, but because they're a bluegrass group, it's a much more niche interest. And that will fall in about the $5,000 to $25,000 range. In addition to directly paying the artist, you are going to expect additional direct and indirect costs. So technical, which is going to be, your sound, your lights, everything associated with that, usually going to be about $5,000 to $10,000 per concert. Backline, which means all of the things like your instruments and staging equipment and things like that. Most artists don't travel with their instruments and instead arrange to have them brought on site. That's usually going to cost between $1,000 and $5,000 per show. You're also going to have things like catering for the artists and for your staff sometimes, hotels for the artists to stay in, ground transportation, so rides to and from the airport, to and from the venue and hotel. Oftentimes we have additional equipment rentals, things like spotlights, specialty lights, forklifts, anything that we need to get the show off the ground. You also are going to need stagehands and personnel. Most shows need at least 6 people working backstage, but we've had calls of up to 18 to 20 working. And you also need security for your event. In addition to these direct costs, indirect costs include things like liability insurance, a ticket processing platform, credit card processing fees, marketing, prep staff, office space, all of these other details that have to be in place in order to make the show itself happen. Now, like I mentioned, I wanted to briefly talk about kind of what the process is to make a show like this happen. So I'm going to talk about the artists and the backstage area, ticketing and marketing, and then what happens on the day of the show in front of house. So with working with the artist, you're going to want to start approximately 6 to 12 months in advance to be booking the artist. And the way this works typically is you're going to work with an agency or manager. Occasionally, you will work with the artist directly. And this is a process you're going to find out who represents the artist that you would like to work with, contact their agent, and engage in a negotiation process for all of the elements I just mentioned, the fee, the technical, who's paying for what, and how much are we paying for it. Once you have confirmed your artist, about a month or 2 before your actual show, you're going to begin the advancing process. And advancing a concert means arranging for all of the logistics. So that's things like getting flight numbers and finding out what time they need to go to the hotel. Does anybody have a peanut allergy? Is there a specific brand of guitar we need to get? That kind of thing. The night before the concert, the artist will generally arrive, especially with flights being weird lately. They prefer to come in the day before. They're going to need transportation from the airport to the hotel. They're going to need a hotel to stay in. If they came on buses, or if they're bringing a semi-truck with their equipment, that might arrive the night before and need a place to park. In the morning, there's going to be load in. This usually starts at 8 a.m. And this is the process of bringing the equipment into the venue and getting set up for the day. Many large artists require a hot breakfast be served as part of load in. And this will last until about noon to 2. Lunch will be served, and that is again catered on our part. Lunch for their team is usually separate from lunch for your team. After lunch, you have things like sound check, and then you finish up by feeding them dinner. On your end, in the ticketing, you do need to have some type of ticketing sales system or software. You can contract a third party, something like 24Tix or Smith's Tix, but they do take substantial fees, and you don't have the flexibility to offer things like season subscriptions usually. It can be handled in-house too, but that means that you have to contract a vendor and get staff. You want tickets to go on sale at least 6 weeks in advance. The longer tickets are on sale, the more you'll sell. The box office needs to be accessible to the public, online, by phone, in person, and your target demographic will determine where to allocate the most resources as far as that accessibility. A younger demographic, you can allocate more resources online, but for our demographic, for example, our patrons really prefer to call on the phone or come in person. You also have to think about things like, are you going to print physical tickets? Some places don't anymore, which saves money, but a lot of people really prefer the physical ticket for a variety of reasons. On the day of show itself, we typically open the gates about an hour prior to showtime, and the box office opens an hour prior to the gates opening. Considerations for the day of the show include things like barricades and security. How are you enclosing the area where people will be sitting? How are you ensuring that the artists are kept safe as well? Is there any type of credential system? What types of chairs are allowed? How will seating be determined? On site, you're going to need staff such as ushers, ticket scanners, you're going to need security, you're going to need managers for all of these things to kind of handle anything that may go wrong. There's always something that goes wrong the day of the concert. On site as well, you're going to want concessions. With everything being so hot at outdoor venues, you at least need water, but food and water is really preferable. You need restrooms. A big thing to consider is accessibility, especially if any of your attendees are using mobility aids, but also looking at how far is the walking distance and what type of access to shade do you have. Another big question is, what is the parking situation? I typically assume that we're going to have approximately 1 car for every 2 to 3 attendees at the concert. So figuring out where to put them is a big thing as well. Many artists bring merchandise with them. And so having, where can they sell that? Can you offer them credit card processing, or do they need to bring their own materials? So these are all kind of the details you have to be working out on the day of the event. And of course, one of the biggest things is handling these groups of people. You're going to have a very large crowd of people in one place at one time, and ensuring that kind of crowd control and logistic is absolutely crucial. So like I said, I could go on forever and ever. I want to be mindful of all of your time though, so I will wrap it up there. I'm happy to answer further questions now, or you can definitely reach out to me via email or phone call.
Thank you so much. A lot of information there to digest for sure.
Yeah.
Could you share with me what the arrangement is with Layton City, for instance? I've been out there several times, and a lot of the city office parking is made available. A lot of parking over at the school. I think it's Northridge.
It's Layton High, yeah.
Or Layton High. I know it was some high school, I'm quite sure. What's your arrangement on the parking situation? Because it's pretty extensive when I've been out there.
It is. We're really fortunate because of the location of the amphitheater. The city does make a lot of the parking at the city offices available to us. Since we share parking with the police department, they do retain their parking, but otherwise, the city office employees are gone by the time our concerts start. So we're able to share that space. That's also the parking for the public park that we're in the middle of. So we utilize that. And then, yes, we're right across the street from Layton High School, which allows us to use that parking lot. The only time we have a problem is if we have a concert after the school year starts and there's a volleyball game or something like that. That can become an issue. Otherwise, we can park at the high school. We also have street parking all around our venue. So that's kind of, it's For parking itself, I don't know that we necessarily have a formal agreement so much as because we are using the park space itself. These are the parking areas that are kept in mind for the park.
And one other question I have, then I'll ask the council here. Does the city share with you the spike they get in sales tax with the various venues there in Layton? I'm sure they're interested in that garnering of extra sales tax as part of the investment they make. Do they share that with you?
Yeah, so by share with us, do you mean revenue sharing or information sharing?
Information on, do they see spikes during the concerts with people going to restaurants, bars, whatever?
Yes, it is very good for commerce in the city. And that's something that I've heard from both the city and anecdotally. We have some restaurants that we work with in the area who've let us know that they actually will schedule extra staff on nights that we have concerts because they will be busier on the nights that we have concerts. We have definitely seen that increase for restaurants and for hotels.
Okay, thank you. Council, what other questions do you have this evening you'd like to ask? Any?
Mayor?
You'll have one first.
Councilmember Swanson, please.
First, thank you for the information. This is, as Mayor said, this is a lot to digest. There's a whole lot going on with these things. One of the things that struck me, though, is that you're describing to us where you are after 43 years of operation, right? This certainly isn't the operation that you had, the complexity that you had, the cost that you had in your infancy in 1979, or even when the amphitheater was first built. You said in 95, was it?
95, yes.
In 95. So, you know, we're looking at 27 years that the amphitheater has been around. I think one of the things that would be helpful for us with our infant that isn't even fully dressed yet. It isn't. We don't even have seats installed or anything like that. We still don't have our sound system. We're lighting. We're still at a point where we're trying to get the facility usable. I'd be interested in information about the operations that you had back in 1979 and 1995 in the infancy that would be, I believe, more applicable to where we are right now with the little amphitheater that we have.
Sure, sure.
Maybe
absolutely
25
correct.
years that there will be a Blue Oyster Cult revival still going on, you know, long after I'm gone. And, you know, my grandkids are loving the music that Grandpa listened to. But right now, we're not anywhere near where you are. And it's great information, but I don't see how it's really applicable to where we are at the moment. We're like I said, we don't even have lights and sound. We still rent that for any production. So how can you help us where we are in our infancy?
Sure. And you're absolutely right.
Could you add, I think that's an excellent question. Could you add in there what it took you subsidy wise to get where you're at today?
Yes.
Great. Yeah.
I'm sure you didn't come out of the chute making money and
No.
may not even be so today with your low ticket prices.
Yeah, there have definitely been moments throughout our history where we were in somewhat dire straits. So you're absolutely correct that I would not recommend getting into the business of concerts if you're looking to make money. It starts much smaller. You're very correct. So our first season, we had, I think, 8 concerts, and it featured things like a community production of Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. We had made a special arrangement with the Utah Symphony to have them perform. Over the years, we had a lot more kind of local and regional artists, and you can actually visit our website, davisarts.org. We have a list of all the artists we've had since 2000, and it did start much smaller. Ryan Shoup in the Rubber Band is a great friend of ours, friend of the organization, because we had him many times in the early years. It didn't start with a bunch of big ones. It started with much more kind of smaller, regional, emerging artists, as well as tributes. I would definitely recommend you not underestimate the value of a good tribute. I will say it needs to be a good tribute because people don't enjoy a phony, but it's a lot of fun to go to a night where you know the music, you know what to expect, and you can just have a good time. And tributes are a very affordable option. So these kinds of local and emerging artists are a great place. And I know that there are even local showcases for Parks and Rec presenters to see this type of talent for things like, city festivals and things like that. There are also regional and national showcases where you can see these types of artists and decide if they're high enough quality at the right price for you. And it's about kind of building from there. A lot of the things that we have, you mentioned that your sound and lights aren't fully finished yet. Many of the things we have came along because of a specific artist at a specific moment. And so it's about building that capacity as you're able to. So starting, within your limits and where you're able to, and pushing a little bit and growing a little bit over time without completely going bust in terms of your resources. We have had a lot of support from the city over the years, and specifically financial support is really crucial to us being able to achieve our mission. I believe that we do add a lot of value to the city in terms of both the revenue that we talked about for hotels and restaurants and tourism, but also for the quality of life for people who live in Layton. In addition to the paid concert series, we offer free concerts throughout the summer. We show free movies in the park on Fridays. We tour shows to elementary schools. We have art galleries. So we're trying to bring this real value add to the quality of life in our community. And it starts small and it builds.
Thank you.
Any other questions? You're awesome. You've given us a lot of information.
Well, it was my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So thank you, and glad you didn't drive up. There's a bit of snow out there, so.
Just a little. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tessa.
Thank you.
All right, good information. We'll now move into our consent agenda. City Council, I hope you've had a chance to review the agenda. At this point in time, I would ask if there's any conflicts of interest that would like to be disclosed this evening based upon items on the agenda. Everyone's shaking their head, so I'll take that as a no. We'll move on then to our minutes. Hopefully you've had a chance to look at those. Are there any suggestions for improvements this evening on the minutes? Mr. Galpas?
I had a couple, I don't love doing this, by the way. I just find stuff, and I think it's really important to make sure that it shows as it was stated in the meeting. So on October 11th, on page 3, not in the packet, but page 3 of the city council meeting minutes, it says during Brad D's public comment, it says an option is to place boulders at the top of the wall. I know that they weren't talking about placing boulders at the top of the wall, clearly. And so I believe the intention was that we were trying to capture that those boulders would be placed at the bottom of the wall. So if you could go back and just kind of correct that. It also says near there, he and his neighbors have discussed an option that would include placing foliage around the top of the wall. I believe this is incorrect, and Brad was referring to the potential of placing foliage at the bottom of the wall.
Correct.
It also says he asked that the council consider allowing foliage at the top of the wall to obscure the view of it. I think the intention was to say to allow foliage and bushes that grow up from the bottom of the wall. Anyways, that was probably a repeat. And then in the section where resident Chris Pulver was talking, it says he stated that he does not want rocks placed at the top of the wall because of the reasons cited by Mr. D. I believe it should say he stated that he does not want rocks placed at the bottom of the wall because he didn't want the weeds and vermins and everything. So that would be it on October 11th.
Now, are you sure you weren't reading those minutes upside down?
Yeah, I wondered, because that was the
Very good-
problem.
Very good catches. Susan, did you get those? All right, then, with those suggestions and corrections, could we have a motion to approve the October 11th, 2022 City Council meeting minutes?
Mayor, I move that we approve the October 11th, 2022 meeting minutes as corrected by Councilman Dalhouse.
Thank you, Councilmember Ekstrom. Do we have a second to that motion?
Second,
Thank you, Councilmember Dalpez. Is there any further discussion on those minutes? All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. We'll move now on to item number 6 on the agenda, which is a discussion or action to consider the October 25th, 2022 minutes. Are there additional corrections to those minutes that would like to be discussed at this time?
this one's actually kind of hilarious, but
All
this is a
right.
good one.
Indeed.
So it says on page 10 of the meeting minutes, in section B, it says, Councilmember Dalpass indicated he had nothing to report. That is incorrect. I was not in attendance. So I did not state anything because I was not there to state it.
That sounds reasonable to me. Any other corrections to those minutes? All right, then I'd look for a motion to consider approving the October 25th, 2022 council meeting minutes. Do we have such a motion?
So moved.
That Councilmember Swanson, thank you. We have a second to that motion.
I'll second.
Thank you, Councilmember Barker. Is there any further discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. We'll now move on to a discussion to amend ordinances as followed to meet the new land use code numbering system. As I reviewed these, I think most of them are just to correct numbers. So Susan, would you like to add any comments to that?
Unless I have any questions, it's pretty straightforward.
Any questions, council members, on those corrections? Simply renumbering based upon other changes and just cleaning up those ordinances. That would be amending ordinance 2022-08, ordinance 2022-16, ordinance 2022-22, and ordinance 2022-24.
Do we need a separate motion for each one or can
I
we
think we
group
can do
them
them all at
together?
once.
Okay, Mayor, I move that we amend the ordinances as outlined according to the new numbering system that was corrected.
Thank you. Got a second to that motion.
Second,
Second by Councilmember Dalpass. Any further discussion on amending those ordinances? I see none. We'll have a roll call vote to amend these ordinances. Councilmember Barker,
Yes.
Councilmember Dalpass,
yes.
Councilmember Ekstrom,
Yes.
Councilmember Swanson.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes unanimously. We'll now move on to item number 8, which are public comments. As I would remind, if you could come to the podium, or if you're online, if you raise your hands, which I will notice that. And state your name, and if you're a resident of North Ogden. And please limit your comments to no longer than 5 minutes. So if you have comments to make at this time, now would be the time.
Sandy Cochran, North Ogden resident. I want to talk about agenda item number 12, the short-term rental regulations. And to everybody that was here the last time this was brought up, I apologize. You're going to hear the exact same arguments from me, but 2 of you weren't here, so I'm going to repeat my stand on this. I am strongly opposed to any short-term rentals in the city where the resident, the owner, is not living on the property. We have 2 possibly 3 short-term rentals in the community I live in, Prominence Point. And I've not been very happy with having them there. Some of the newer townhouses are so close that you can literally stand between 2 of them and touch the front doors of 2 different homes. And my neighbors have 2 little girls. We don't have any green space playgrounds for children to play. So these little girls play on the front porch. I cannot imagine having my little children playing on the front porch where within arm's distance is a home where every day there could be different strangers coming in and out. We don't know who any of these people are. I'm assuming they're signing up online. I don't even know if the people who are signing the contracts online are the actual people who are showing up there. I mean, these are total strangers to us, and it's different people all the time. Some of them are really nice, friendly, decent people. Some of them have been a real pain. They don't follow the HOA rules in the community. Their dogs run wild. They don't clean up after them. One Saturday morning at 8 o'clock, I came downstairs and there was a little boy outside my front door screaming at the top of his lungs. I opened the door. His mom was standing there with him and her 2 dogs. The dog was peeing on my water fountain. And I asked her if there was a problem, and she said, no, he's just not happy. And I said, do you live here? And she said, oh, I'm just in the B&B down there. I have another neighbor who's 78 years old. She lives in a patio home by herself. She's about this big. She's as timid as they come. One of the renters one night pulled into her driveway at 10:30 at night. She's in bed by 8 o'clock every night. This person got out of their vehicle, went up to her front door, tried punching a code in. It didn't work. They kept punching. Then they went to the garage and started punching a code in. That didn't work. So they went back to the vehicle, got a paper, went back to the front door. It didn't work. They got in their vehicle and left and went to the B&B that they had rented. They were at a single level family home, 1 level, single family. And they had rented a 2-story townhouse. Pictures of the front door when you rent these are online. I've gone and looked at the sites. How they got confused, I have no idea. But the same lady had another renter 6 days later at the same time of night, different person, show up at her house and do it again. When I talked to her, she said she was petrified. The first time, she didn't know what was going on. The second time, she had talked to her daughter by then, and her daughter got on the ring and told these people to get the hell off her mom's property. But I mean, these people just, the owner is not there to help them, the owner of these places. It's just not been, it's not been a pleasant experience having them there. And I don't see it getting any better. Short-term rentals in Utah have gone up by almost 24% in the past 2 years. And I want to read you a small article I found online. Leaders in Washington County, Utah have approved stricter rules for short-term rentals in unincorporated parts of the county, including a ban on vacation rental properties that are not occupied by their owners. Changes are driven by residents' complaints about renters, as well as concerns about the supply of affordable rental housing for local residents. According to Washington County Community Development Director Scott Messel, statistics show that every 10% increase in short-term rental properties in a local area leads to a 42% rise in rental prices. So not only do the short-term rentals reduce the housing that's available, but they raise the cost of what is available to where local residents cannot afford it. A lot of major cities in the United States have passed strict rules, either banning or requiring residents to reside on the property Some of these are Santa Monica, Oakland, Honolulu, Vegas. Some of the resort areas like Orlando, Miami Beach only allow B&Bs in these high touristy areas, not in regular residences.
Sandy, I'm time just about up.
Okay, so let me just make one really quick point. The last time I spoke, Councilmember Swanson argued that homeowners had particular rights and we couldn't take them away from them. I want to argue with you that these people are not homeowners. It's not their home. Their home is somewhere else. It's not these renters' home. They're just coming here for a few days. These people are business owners. And the reason I know they're business owners is because the city requires them to get a business license. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandy. Anyone else present this evening that would like to comment?
I'm Scott Ash, I'm a resident of North Ogden. So I came for the same reason, for the opposite opinion. And I'm just gonna share that I didn't expect to speak. But we got it. So I don't own the Airbnb. I've stated a few of them. They've always been nice. They usually have rule books that you follow. They usually have people that you contact in advance. They have a lot of expectations on cleanliness. You can rate the people you rent too, whether or not they're lousy, whether or not they're noisy, whether or not they pee on your bushes. You can rate them. This man who owns one. Likewise, if you own one, you can be rated. The reason I care about it is because when I moved here in 2011, I bought a house for $170,000. And I almost own that house. And I work for the military, and I just got orders to Japan this summer. And I don't want to give up my house. And I don't want to turn it into a rental for somebody on a year-long, 2-year-long lease where they can come in and destroy my house. And I want to come back when I visit, and I want to black it out, and I want to live in my own house. But I can't do that in any kind of rental agreement other than a short-term lease. That's the only way I can do it. I can leave my furniture there. I can sleep in my own bed. It's not a money-making thing. I would turn it over to a property manager who lives right here. I would have a cleaning crew right here. That's business for people in this community. I just want to own my home and not let go of it. I don't want to go pay $500,000, $700,000 when I got one for $170,000 a decade ago. And I understand the complaints when you're talking about townhomes, very close quarters, walls that are thin, bad renters, the impact on crime. Do we have more police that get called up for people that want to have a party at midnight? I understand all that. But I think there are a lot of people who go into this for various reasons. They don't just go into it to make that their livelihood. I stayed in one down in Cedar City where the guy lived next door and he bought his neighbor's home. So when his kids come home, they can all get together and have Thanksgiving and Christmas together. But he doesn't want to pay 2 mortgages. So he Airbnbs it half the time. And when his kids come to visit, that's where they stay. I got an 18-year-old and a 16-year-old. I'm not that far off from that same situation myself. I think there are a lot more reasons people go into this. There are a lot more considerations in how they go into this. And when we start talking about banning them or making it extremely tight on how they can run it, we're not considering how that negatively impacts the people that are going into it. Or if we are, Maybe I'm the exception, maybe I'm the weird one. I might be. And maybe I gotta live with that. But I don't want the only voices on this to be people that are upset about it. I think that there's a place for them. I think that you guys clearly do your research when you bring people in to learn about what can be done. And I just ask that you would do that thoroughly before starting to ban things. Because again, for those of us that want to hold on to our homes and find some middle ground with a situation like mine, I think you can probably understand why I'm a little bit passionate the other way. So thanks.
Thank you. John, anyone online like to comment?
Yes, we do have two people. The first one just says KCJ, so they'll need to give us their name.
Okay, Casey J.
Sorry, that's
Yep,
Corey
speak
Lynn
on.
Hayatala.
Yes, I do.
Corey Lynn Hayatala. Okay, North Ogden resident. And Sandra, thank you for your comments. I can understand both sides of the situation, but the one thing that you need to consider in our situation at Prominence Point is we're an HOA. So we're paying HOA fees every month for maintenance, and eventually, hopefully, we will get our clubhouse and swim pool. So you have Airbnbs come in. These people don't care about this place. They're just here on vacation. Who knows if they're bringing friends in that aren't staying there to come and just go swim or whatever, and using up the facilities that we're paying for. I don't see how that is a fair thing for us to deal with, let alone there's no background checks on the people that are renting these places, which you've seen in the news, several places that have had horrible things happen. And I think in our development with an HOA, that if the city authorizes it, I need to know if the HOA can ban it so we can keep our development from having this happen. I can understand single family dwellings that aren't in HOA developments or off by themselves. Possibly that could work out as long as you've got serious restrictions and you've got management that's on site or close. But in our small development, there's no parking anyway. And I don't know how fair that is for the HOA payments that we make to be used for Airbnb. Thank you.
Thank you. John, who else do we have?
We have Jeanette
That
Sweet.
sounded.
Jeanette? Are you with us? Jeanette, we can't hear you.
She needs to unmute her microphone.
Hey, Jeanette? Can you unmute your microphone?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Jeanette Sweet, and I am a resident of North Ogden, straight up the North Ogden Hill from Washington Boulevard. I am known to have previously made a major issue about an Airbnb. I live in a single family resident, and there was an Airbnb right next door to me. People who've listened to my spiel before, including most of the council members, there have been major issues with that. The access to the residence is at the back of the home. The homeowner tried all kinds of shenanigans with that home, including renting every bedroom top and bottom in that place, originally trying to have one of his tenants that had stayed there for 6 months take over the running of the Airbnb so that he could move out. I have had people come to my house at 2:30 in the morning trying to get into my front door. And just recently, about 2 months ago, called the police because somebody was banging on both of my gates on the north and south side of my home, trying to get into the backyard to get access to the Airbnb. I have people parked on my driveway to get access to his B&B. Now, the biggest problem I have with this whole thing is that there are regulations in place. There are rules that are supposed to be abided by that you put in the original ordinance. And it took a year and a half, and that guy deciding to sell his house, because this started in October of 2020, and I was unable to get it to stop. So whatever decisions are made in regards to these short-term rentals, which I understood was to ease the housing market in the state of Utah based on the federal and then the state, the county, and then their cities' desire to help with short-term rentals with that issue. If we're going to have them, there has to be a means to enforce them. The guy in the ordinance itself, it says that you do have to have a business permit. He was issued a business permit only after I made a stink about it. And then it was issued prematurely without him adhering to all of the guidelines that were set in that ordinance. And then secondly, he did not get a permit for all of the reconstruction that he did in the basement, putting up, taking down walls, putting in a kitchen, et cetera, et cetera. And I was told that that's just a completely separate issue. Now, there was things that were issued to him, like supposedly cease and desist orders and everything else. And every time I continued to call on it, I was given some roundabout lip service about it. And so if you're going to allow this to continue to happen and even expand it in some way, then you have to be able to enforce it, because it does us as residents no good if you're not going to enforce our making you aware of it, which it rests on the shoulders of the citizens to let you know that these things are illegally happening next door. That's what I have to say.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else online, John? Anyone else here in the audience that would like to comment?
Good evening. My name is Alexis Hammer. I am currently a resident of Pleasant View, but I lived in North Ogden for about 2 years while I was building my home. I run corporate housing in a townhouse in North Ogden, and I've been doing it since I moved out of the home. And to clarify, they're not big money makers. They're really not. We could actually probably make more money doing long-term rent. The reason why I do it is so we can have our family members come and stay close to us, because I live 5 minutes away. On top of that, the booking platforms, when guests come, they are vetted. And before they can even book my home, they're vetted. They're asked why they're come. There's a minimum day of a stay. They have to provide their government ID when booking with these platforms as well. And what I do on top of that, and which I know other short-term rental owners do, is I have a security system on the property. I've got cameras on the front and on the back of the home. So I constantly am monitoring them and seeing who's coming and going. And if there's more than 4 people on the reservation, I can tell by the camera, and it's actually more money that they get charged. So it's also, the average nightly rate is $250 to $300 a night. So you're not going to get Joe Schmo coming in if they're paying $300 a night. And that's been my experience for almost 2 years since running it. On top of that, I am the homeowner of it. So I'm going to actually care about the upkeep of the property more than a long-term renter would, in my opinion. I also run another one in Florida, and the neighbors have commented of, wow, you guys have really stepped up the property, because when they drive up to it, the first thing, is first impression. So we've upkept the property very well. So I'm obviously in favor of them, and it's not my livelihood, but it gives opportunity for family members of mine and for guests that come in. They get to stay in these properties. So anyways, thanks for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, thank you for your comments. We'll be addressing that issue a little bit later in our agenda. At this point in time, I'd like to turn the time over to Council Member Swanson in regards to discussion or action to consider approval of members of a budget review subcommittee and the audit committee. Council Member Swanson.
Thank you, Mayor. As you all remember, during our truth and taxation hearing, we had a resident, Mr. Anderson, stand and offer to our benefit a citizens committee that would serve in a non-official capacity to help advise council as we go through our budgeting session. And we've talked about that numerous times as a council, and we've agreed that that would be a good thing for us to have. And so tonight I'm going to give you the list of names of individuals that have volunteered to be on that committee and to serve. Just so that you know, this committee will serve as a subcommittee of the audit committee. And Randy Wynn, who is on the audit committee, will serve as the liaison between the audit committee and this subcommittee. And the subcommittee will meet on its own. We will record those meetings so that other citizens who want to be a part of that, who want to see what was said and done, can participate in that. So if you're here when I read your name, if you'd stand so that everybody can see who you are. Doug Anderson, Steve Thompson, I think Steve is here. Nathan Rossler, I think I pronounced that right. Clark Jensen, thank you, Clark. Randy Wynn, he's not here this evening. Chris Pulver, Sandy Cochran, and Brenda Ashdown. Brenda is not here tonight. So council, I'd ask for your approval of these members to be on this committee. Mayor?
Thank you, Councilmember Swanson, and let me just express our appreciation for those who are willing to serve. If you take time to read the North Ogden Connection, you'll see my article this coming months about hyper reactionary situations that take place. I think this is a reaction that is calm and influencing, which we really appreciate. Your willingness to give us a citizen's view of the budgeting process. So with that, council, I would seek a motion to approve the names that were submitted by Councilmember Swanson.
Mayor, I move that we approve the budget subcommittee members as introduced by Councilmember Swanson.
Thank you. We have a second to that motion.
Second.
Okay, Councilmember Barker, we'll take your second on that. Any further discussion? I think it's council member discussion, Doug, and I'm sorry. Yeah, the turn may be later in public comments, but you're always welcome to contact any of us directly. So any other comments? All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Welcome aboard. Thank you for your willingness to serve and give us some input. And once again, this is input that will be considered by the council, with council having final discretion on budget items. So it's a learning experience for all of us. All right, we'll move on to item number 10. This is a discussion or action to consider a resolution declaring surplus property located at approximately 3660 north, 600 east. Our presenter will be our planning director, Scott Hess.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the council. As a quick refresher, this is an item that came before the council back in September 27th, 2022, and was postponed at that time for the staff to have a consideration of all the different parcels the city owns and help guide that discussion with recommendations on types of parcel ownership the city has and what could, should, or shouldn't be surplus property. The resolution of that from the staff side is that we own a lot of property. We own nearly 300 parcels, almost the same number of acres, things like actually 260 parcels over almost 300 acres. And we determined that there's a small handful that you can almost pick out as you think about them that were recommended to be surplus from staff's perspective. So anything else that's related to streets, stormwater, culinary water, those sorts of things, drainage ditches that we access, utilize, it was staff's recommendation to keep those properties.
at the council at the time, we had Councilmember Barker and Severin both had indicated in that meeting that in the meeting talking about property ownership, that they would still entertain property requests from property owners on a individual basis. And so that was kind of the conclusion of that piece. So we're now, this number of months later, bringing this one back after being postponed to consider the resolution of declaring a piece of property surplus. So just a clarification, this isn't the determination of whether this property would or would not be sold, what the price of it would be, what the, who it could be posted out to. It's just literally, should we put this on a list that declares it a surplus, which then gives the city the power to, through this public process, provide a price for it or an auction or however it works to sell the property. Further, just what it is, it's a sliver of property that's owned that accesses back a storm detention basin between two property owners. It was originally thought to have been an easement, but it is actually a physical piece of property. It's not an easement. And there's a shed that's currently located too close to the property line in a contested location. The property owner to the north has asked to purchase this property in order to retain the shed in its current location, I believe. To do that, they would have to survey the entire property. They'd have to do a subdivision amendment because that parcel itself is actually part of the subdivision plat. So certainly there's an avenue to do that, but the cost would be higher than just the individual, cost of purchase of that property specifically. And with that, I entertain any questions.
Scott, you and I had a discussion about this. Council, I would just throw this out for your consideration. Even though declaring surplus property doesn't mean you have to act on it, I want to make sure that you're willing to actually sell the property, because to me, that's giving false hope if you're not. So I just ask you in your deliberations to consider that, so that those who are seeking to buy this property knows if you're serious or not. We don't drag this on. So just my comment there. Any questions for Scott?
I have one.
Council member Ekstrom, go ahead.
Yeah, so did staff go through each of those 300 plus properties and assess each one of them? Thank you for that. That was a lot of work.
Yeah, so Casey Hunsaker actually did that through a GIS analysis, and part of it was fairly simple. We have a lot of little individual slivers of property that are adjacent to roads, so they're additional road right of way we may pick up. And a couple of examples of those properties we deemed to be surplus are the home on the Washington Boulevard expansion as you're coming up the hill, up 400. It's on the east side at the intersection of Alberta and 400.
Okay.
We purchased a home, tore the home down, widened the street. That's a piece of property that is being resold essentially to put a new home, or whatever the end use of that is. You've got the storm detention basin off of 2600 North that'll be moved. That's a prime commercial land. You've got a handful of acres, 3+ acres up at the mouth of Coldwater Canyon that aren't limited by the deed restriction to keep them open space forever, like the 2700 North trailhead is. So there's some acreage there that could be sold and developed. Small detention basin on the southwest side of the city that was never used for detention basin. It was collected as part of a subdivision. So those are parcels we would say, those are easy to offload, but anything else that's related to a vital infrastructure use, cities are patient landowners. It's really not costing us a whole lot of money to keep. We have some maintenance costs, but there's no sales tax or property taxes or anything that's associated with them. So staff's recommendation was to hold those properties.
Thank you.
Any other questions, council? On the agenda, we will be addressing resolution 12-22, 2022, which would be an action to declare this a surplus property. So do we have a motion to do so?
Mayor, I'll make the motion to approve resolution 12-2022. I'm declaring property located at approximately 3660 North 600 East as surplus.
Thank you. Do we have a second to that motion? Looks like the motion dies for lack of a second. Okay, we'll move on now to item number 11. This is a similar discussion, which is an action to consider a property purchase request located at approximately 234 East, 3900 North. And Scott Hess will also address this issue. Mr. Hess?
Thank you. So this is a similar, slightly different issue. This one's further up the hill. We have a property owner who, Willis family, who have an encroachment. We have a fence and some landscaping. And at the time, there was a piece of equipment that was parked on the property, and it's just kind of touches their property and it continues on and is a part of its detention basin. At the time, this goes back to a meeting in August of 2022 that preceded, this kind of happened together and it predated that conversation about property ownership. There's a request from staff initially to do a land use permit for the fence. That land use permit was kind of the vehicle or the tool that the city brought it forward to make the council aware of the encroachment. And there was a request at the time from the property owner to purchase the property. So this one's actually one step before what the Keys property you just saw was. We haven't even gotten to a request to declare it surplus. So this is one that you'll need to decide tonight. The decision point tonight is whether or not the council wants to move forward and have a declaration of surplus property. And then at that point, again, it would be, do we want to sell this property, auction it, put it up to the neighbors, whatever else it is. If the decision is to not surplus that property, then you go down the road of, what's the city going to do to remove or vacate the encroachment that we have on the property that is the city's as of right now.
Council, do you have any questions for Mr. Hess? Mr. Galpass?
Scott, in the meeting agenda, there were some items that were supposed to be attached, and maybe I just wasn't able to find them. I was interested in specifically, there was apparently a document from one of the management companies that probably owns property around there that gave some sort of statement of support, I think, to this, and I just wanted to hear what it had to say. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I do, and it's actually, it's attached to the August 23, 2022. So sorry, I just didn't drag all of those down and over. So you give me a minute, I can look it up and see what it is. They came with some signatures from the neighborhood as well.
I do remember that one.
A request to keep the property or keep the improvements on the property because it had improved it visually, but I'll have to go back and look exactly what that
And
said.
was that management company, do you remember, where was that surrounding piece of land? Obviously, they had a vested interest to make a statement and provide it. I just can't remember where it was in reference to this address.
Going back to August, I'll have to look it up as well.
Okay.
It's on the screen.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, thank you.
So
This
who
is
is
from Vallejo Management.
Yeah, who is the Vallejo man?
That's kind of what I'm wondering.
They own the property directly north, the M&S Holdings. They're the management company of that parcel. I can pull it.
So the original request for this one was to occupy and purchase this triangle shaped piece of property and potentially even more, and reroute the access road to the detention basin from the north. So this may have been support from that property owner on the north to help figure out the rerouting. But now I'm going back into conversations from the summer that I don't totally remember all the details on.
Because I think, isn't that big piece of land, like if you zoom that out, I think that big piece of land is Weaver School District, right? Yeah, so that's a potentially future school. And so it's not that piece.
The one to the east of it.
This piece is M&S Holdings.
Okay.
And then they also have they're the ones who sold this to the school district, and they own this ground as well.
Okay, are they the Northview Estates developer?
Yes, that's
Okay.
correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions of Scott? All right, you heard from our planning director. The agenda has a request for a motion to declare this a surplus property and see if there is interest in the council of selling this. I understand, Scott, just so the council has all information, that there are others interested, at least one, in purchasing this property if it were to be put up for sale. All right, council, do we have a motion? That would allow this property purchase request located at 234 East, 3900 North to be considered. Which would go through the process of declaring it as surplus property. Once again, I would just ask if you are interested in that, that you're serious about going through the whole process so that we're fair to the those who are requesting this. So do we have a motion?
Sorry, I don't have a motion, but I just was wondering if we might be able to discuss it a little further. And the only reason I say that is just rehashing it because we have discussed it before. I just want to make sure we all understand the situation. If I remember correctly, resident Willis had approached the city, had asked if it was okay if he had, if he used some of this property. And it's a little bit in question as to if there was official authorization to do that, but it was kind of, to me, it was a little bit hard to say exactly what happened.
I can clarify that for you.
Okay.
There was never authorization for use of that property by the property, by those who can give them authority to utilize the property. I know there was some text message communication, just to clarify,
Okay.
so the council has all the information.
Okay.
I know there was some texting back and forth. I think that was attached, as I recall, the text messaging on that.
Okay.
But I can assure you that there's no record of anyone who has authority to authorize the use of the property.
Okay.
There's no documentation of that. Councilmember Swanson.
Mayor, as I looked at this and compared and contrasted it with the one that we just said no to, the on the keys, the one on 3660 on 600 East, it's just a little sliver of encroachment, right? I look at this one and this is darn near a buildable lot in area that was encroached upon. It wasn't just a fence line that's off. This was completely enclosing property that the person did not own with a vinyl fence, a pool that is essentially built on the property line, and essentially taking over property that they didn't own without permission to do so. This wasn't just I'm going to park a trailer on a vacant piece of land that is adjacent to a detention pond, or actually it looks like a Pine View Reservoir pond. If there is city interest in a small sliver of land that is an access back to a critical city infrastructure, certainly a 8, 9, 10,000 square feet that is been determined at some point to be critical to city infrastructure is certainly something that we ought to be hanging on to.
Thank you. Any other comments from council? Councilmember Dalpaz, did these answer your questions you had? Do you have further?
No, I don't have one further. I just felt like since the situation to me was much different than the other one, I just wanted to discuss it a little bit further.
Thank you for doing so. Councilmember Barker, did I see you give a signal for?
Yeah, and this is, I think both of these properties, they're similar in nature. They have an access road. We can't sell them. We can't develop them. The reason I'm in favor of selling or surplusing them, it takes work off our city staff to maintain them. Right, since over the summer, once we told Mr. Keith that he no longer could use the access road, he no longer maintained it. None of our staff had time to go up there and maintain it all summer long. Why do we want to put more work on our staff when it's not needed? If we have property owners that want to help maintain and make our city property look good, I mean, I don't see the point in just keeping something just because we're not going to lose our access points. The previous property, we would have kept our access road, we would have kept the easement. They still could have got access to the detention basin, but now the property owners are maintaining it, not us. This one's similar. If you make them tear it all down, we're going to start getting phone calls. Hey, come and mow your weeds, knock down these rocks or the weeds in the rocks. And now we'll have to just make our staff work even more. So I'm in favor of selling pieces like this where it holds no significance to the city and it actually makes the city look better.
Thank you. Comments? All right, Councilmember Galvin, do you have anything
Could I
comment?
just maybe get John Call's advice, just to know very clearly if we don't surplus it, next steps for this property owner, because obviously what's there is not permitted. So I just want to make sure we understand very clearly what will happen if it's not surplused and we don't go down that road.
So we would start with just the informal process of the request to move the things that aren't part of the city, personal property, or move it off. And then realign their fence to be on the boundary. The pool has already been moved. They actually did an in-ground pool. The above ground pool was a temporary thing. But there is some other stuff out there that need to be moved off. And that would be the next step. And then if they refuse, then we would go through the legal process through code enforcement, or even to the district court if we needed to.
Answer your question, Councilmember
Yes.
Galvin? Councilmember Ekstrom.
I just had a thought. Instead of surplusing it and possibly selling it, do we have any interest as a city in leasing, like a long-term kind of lease for these homeowners that have encroached and, to Councilmember Workers Park? I guess one of the things that bothered me is they said, well, kind of a you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours kind of things. Like, I'll maintain it if you give me what I want, but otherwise I'm not going to be a good citizen and maintain it. You know what I mean? That bothered me. I mean, that was just like, okay, well, I don't know. That's just me. But, if we really don't need it, we still own it. But then they're allowed to keep it, maybe just as long as they are the property owners, something like that. Does anybody have an idea about that?
I think when
Scott or John? I'm sorry.
I think when we talked about leasing, if I remember, because we've talked about this in one form or fashion over the last few meetings or some past meetings. And if I remember correctly, we landed on not being very interested in leasing out property and for various reasons. But I think that was kind of, as a council, we were kind of leading in that direction. It's what I remember. Not that it can't be considered. It's just that's what I remember.
Meeting that I would figure.
John, did you have input?
I was gonna say the leasing option, in theory would work better for the Willis property than the Keys property. Because there's a structure that crosses the property line. It's a shed, it's a movable object, on the Keys property, but that they could not physically leave that shed where it's at because it's currently too close to the property line or across the property line. Whereas the Willis's, there's not an actual structure over there right now. It's some landscaping. There might be a trampoline, but we don't have those structures. And so it's more complicated when you start going to that level. Not that it's not doable if the council wants us to go.
Okay. Councilman Swanson, did you have further comment?
Just to reiterate that in today's age, taking over a piece of property that you clearly know is not yours, that you clearly know that you do not have permission to use. I mean, obviously there would be a contract, something signed. I find it very difficult to believe that anyone today would be comfortable fencing in, landscaping, basically taking over and adding to their own property, a sizable piece of property, without documentation that said that that was okay from the owner of that property. Not a text that really doesn't give any approval for anything. No, I mean, it really strikes me. It rubs me really in the wrong way. I think we open ourselves up for this happening in the future. If we set this precedent and say, you can just kind of, as long as until we catch you, fence it in, do whatever you'd like with it. until you get caught, and then you can ask for forgiveness. It just, more importantly, the staff, the departments that we depend on in this city have said this is property that we ought to hang on to, just as they did with the keys, and I trust them. And I think we ought to hang on to it.
Thank you. Any further comments? Councilmember Ekstrom.
I do, because we have precedent. We did it for a section of Barker Park that, you know, it was kind of the same thing. They got sort of permission and we put it under the agreement. So it's kind of, you open a can of worms, we've kind of opened. So, you know, I hate to show.
Can I clarify Barker Park, it's in the contract that they can utilize it.
You can use like for farming, and so we've kind of, you know, I don't know, it bothered me, but
Which property are you talking about?
Rod Melanie section of Barker Park
Oh,
on that one.
right. Well, I'll go on record to say I would have opposed that back when it was proposed for the same reasons.
I did, yeah. It was-
Okay. Well, on the agenda, we're looking for a motion to consider selling this property. So at this point in time, I would seek a motion.
Hey, Mayor, I think I know where this is going, but I'm gonna propose, what's the resolution number?
There is no resolution on this one. This was just,
Okay, I'll make the motion that we surplus property located at approximately 234 East, 3900 North.
So it'd be setting the hearing for the.
Setting the
surplus.
hearing. Yeah, that language.
that language. Okay, with that language, do we have a second to Councilmember Barker's motion? I see no second. Motion dies for lack of a second. Okay, we will then move on to item number 12. This is a discussion to consider an ordinance, develop short-term rental regulations. Mr. Hess, and I would also ask Councilmember Swanson, who I think has been actively engaged in some alternatives based upon council citizen input that might balance this out. So, Mr. Hess.
Thank you. So tonight, I'm gonna remind everybody, present what the planning commission recommended on September 21st, 2022. You heard that initial recommendation, October 25th, city council meeting. The council provided guidance that went back and staff reconsidered some ordinance language and is bringing forward a draft ordinance tonight for your consideration. So staff was asked to look at short-term rentals in the city. We don't know the exact number because I know that there are people out there who are doing it without permission, but we have 10 business licenses for short-term rentals, and it fluctuates, but you go out on Airbnb or VRBO's website and there's 25 or 30 of them available across the city. State code requires more than just that posting alone as a way for us to go after them. That was something the cities were doing for revenue a couple of years ago, but that's been pulled back from the state. So we're pretty well in a reactive code enforcement process with short-term rental that, you know, really requires a neighbor, somebody who has had an issue with something to call, and then we can look into whether or not they have a business license. At that point, we'll have a citizen complaint and maybe no business license, and we can ask them. And our first step in all of these cases always, like John had said, is that, you know, friendly request to comply essentially, and we do that. And, you know, 9 times out of 10, people will fill out our business license application, which is $100, and move on with their life and continue doing their short-term rental. We don't have really any hard provisions in here in our current code other than in the accessory dwelling units component of our code. So therefore they are permitted, I think also by state code, and John can clarify this, that the only thing we can't do as a city is we can't eliminate them altogether. So we do have to provide somewhere by zoning or by use where these would be permitted by right. And then we can have whatever standards that we want to address, or however, you know, whatever enforcement level we want to have go against those. Staff believes that these are a pretty minor impact on housing in North Ogden. You know, we have maybe double digits, maybe a few dozen of these total in over 6,000 residential units in the city and growing. We're about 21,000 population of what we think will be about 40,000. So looking at these standards right now is a good time because we do have significant growth left to look forward to. But the ordinance as it was recommended from Planning Commission and amended, prior to Councilmember Swanson contacting us over the weekend, and we have an alternate ordinance. I'm going to ask Councilmember Swanson to talk to. Right now, this would eliminate short-term rentals in any multifamily structures. We did specify that it's in residential structures, not by zoning, because just due to the nature of cities and complications, we have single-family homes that exist in multifamily zoning districts, or multifamily and single-family homes that exist in commercial zoning districts. So doing it by zoning specifically, it can become really limiting as opposed to by the structure itself. If it's not a shared wall construction, if it is a standalone single-family home, not a duplex, triplex, townhome, apartment, those would be permitted with a business license. We do have some other recommended items in here that came from Planning Commission and the council, like having a person who is either property manager and owner who's available by phone 24/7, and then available to physically be there in person within 1 hour of a phone call. A question from last time this came in front of the council was what the civil citation would look like if somebody weren't able to comply with that. And we have our standard code enforcement civil citation. So I gave that to you all so that you'd see what a property owner would receive if, on the next day after, essentially, if they were unable to produce somebody within 1 hour, if there was a party or something happening at a short-term rental that was unable to be broken up. We've got some parking requirements, 1 parking space per bedroom rented, and then compliance essentially with building, fire, health code, smoke detectors, ground fault, circuit interrupters, all the things we essentially are saying. We know we have some illegal ones now. Do we either want to attempt, go heavy-handed on enforcement, which we're a small city, we have limited code enforcement available to do that, or would we rather make these, not hugely publicly available? We're not going to promote, come out to North Ogden and do this, but at the same time, if you're going to do it, we're going to make sure it's safe, and we're going to use our business license powers that we have, our police powers to go in, do inspections, make sure that we're keeping people safe in these situations, and then maintain them annually as a business license. So with that, that's staff's recommendation if the ordinance is drafted, and then welcome any questions you have, and of course for Councilmember Swanson to talk about his research.
Thank you, Scott, and Councilmember Swanson. I know you sent out to the council the Ken Gardner Institute research.
Yeah, John, can we bring that up?
Yep.
Which I thought was very interesting. While he's pulling that up, I always look at an ordinance,
The link
avoid a
to
problem.
the
Oh.
Kempsey Gardner
Catch a problem.
Yeah.
research.
Sorry. I know, I saved it into this.
There it is. One of the difficulties in a discussion like this is separating fact from fiction, emotion from whether or not we're actually facing a problem. So I did the Kempsey Gardner Research Institute down at the University of Utah is a great, pretty non-biased research institute that comes out and does all kinds of research. In recent years, they've done a lot regarding short-term rentals, the housing crisis. The research that the data that they crunch and make available to policymakers is really pretty amazing. So on this first page here, you do see from 2019 to 2021 that there's been a pretty precipitous rise in the number of short-term rentals in Utah, from 14,782 in 2019 to nearly 4,000 more in 2021. As you're looking at that, the red on those graphs represents short-term rentals where the entire home is the short-term rental. In gray, it's where they rent out just a private room. So go ahead and scroll down to the next page, John. What this shows us here are the primary counties where the associated percentages of the housing stock within that county that are short-term rentals. And so what you'll see is as you crunch through the numbers that the Institute provided, you see that we have Kane County, Garfield County, Garland County, Summit County, Rich County, where the greatest density of these things are. And there's a fair amount down in Washington County as well. And one of the questions you might ask is, why is that? Well, each of these locations has something that is a huge tourist draw. Obviously, Washington County, you have St. George, and all of the activities that go on down there. Kane County, and Garfield counties, you have the outdoor areas there of Zion National Park and the other parks there. The areas around Moab, Summit County, obviously with Park City, they have a huge issue with it there. And then Rich County, because of Bear Lake in that area, are the primary drivers there. And so if you look at Rich County in the short-term rentals as a share of total housing in Rich County, it's 11.4%. It's high there because there are a large number of short-term rentals with a relatively small housing stock. Right below that, though, you can see Weber County as a whole, 0.8%, and that's Weber County as a whole. And almost 50%, maybe even 60% of that is found over in the Ogden Valley. And obviously the draw there is Snow Basin, Powder Mountain, and also Nordic, and those opportunities there. If you look at then if you go ahead and scroll down, John. Keep going. Keep it right there. It's good. So the total number of short-term rentals. If you look in Weber County, we have 819, and again, well over half of that is over in the Ogden Valley, and that's for the county as a whole. And if you look at the total housing in 2021 of Weber County, it's 0.8%. It's less than 1% of the entire county housing stock. Sandy, you mentioned a very telling statistic that for every 10% of housing stock that is converted over into short-term rentals, that rental rates go up 42%. Unfortunately, here in the county, we're not even at 1%, right? So the impact on housing stock, in my mind, is negligible. If we look at what we believe is the short-term rental stock that we have here in North Ogden, if we figure it at roughly 29, 30 different homes, we're at 0.4% here. Less than 0.5% here in North Ogden is short-term rentals. John, go ahead and scroll down a little bit further, if you would, please, down to the next one. Here are the counties ranked by total number of short-term rentals. If you look at Summit County down there in Park City area, they've gone from just under 5,000 to just under 6,000 short-term rentals. You'll see there that Weber County is number 6 on the list, which just by itself would sound pretty awesome. But it's only 747 total units, which again is 0.8%. If you go back up to Summit County, you'll see that one of the reasons that they're struggling there and that they are instituting is that 24% of their housing stock is short-term rentals. That's pretty huge. That's a significant portion. If you look at Grand County, there are 19%. You look at Rich County up around Bear Lake, 16%. So it gets pretty hard there. The reason that I bring all this up is, while there are certainly instances, Sandy, that you've documented so well and that others have documented, while there are certainly instances where less than appealing or favorable things have happened, as I read back through the minutes of the Planning Commission meeting, the police department was asked about their response, the calls that they get, and their response was there are virtually no calls. that are associated with short-term rentals with either noise or other complaints and other problems. And so one of the questions that I had to ask myself as I go through this, and I'll be very honest, I would not want a short-term rental next to me. But we do have property rights, and whether or not you live on the property that you own your rights are not contingent upon whether or not you live on the property. That's just the Constitution. If you're a property owner, you have rights. So in my mind, I don't think anything needs to be done. I think we're good where we are, but I also recognize that there are concerns, that there are valid concerns that the residents have. And so I asked Scott and John if they would prepare, if you can go to the other version of the ordinance there. I'm very uncomfortable, as I mentioned the last time we spoke with this, with creating haves and have-nots as far as those rights go, who can and who cannot own a property and then use it as a short-term rental. We did talk about that with accessory dwelling units, that we create haves and have-nots, and that's really more about a property space issue than it is an actual right. If I own a townhome, there's no room to create an ADU. And we have put limitations on all properties with how big an ADU can be and those kinds of things. Listening to Vice Chairman Mason's comments and other comments that were made, to comments that Sandy and others have made, I would propose, council, that we, instead of banning short-term rentals in any section of our city, that we can, I believe we can take care of the issues and create the circumstances that we're looking for by simply requiring an owner occupancy for short-term rentals. That prevents it. There have been hypotheticals set up. Well, what if somebody buys, in a townhome unit, they buy 20 of them and they're going to short-term rental them? Well, they wouldn't be able to do that because you can't occupy 20 units at the same time and then rent them out. As I spoke to others who have some experience with short-term rentals, one of the things that owner occupancy does is it puts some skin in the game for the owner, that if you're going to rent out your property, you're also going to get to enjoy whatever circumstances those renters create. You get to try to sleep with them partying till 2 o'clock in the morning if that's what they're going to try to do. So my recommendation would be that we pass the ordinance. No other changes were made to the initial proposed ordinance. The only difference would be there would be no banning in any section of the city, and we would require owner occupancy for short-term rental. And now we'll turn it over to you.
Council, any questions? Further discussion? Questions of Mr. Hess or Mr. Call? Councilmember Ekstrom?
I have one. Well, as Mr. Ash came up and talked about his situation, I can see how this would be a problem, right? He's going to be deployed to Japan. He wants to, rent out. And if he's got a responsible property management company, I would be willing to let something like that happen. I mean, just as long as I think somebody is available 24/7 and has taken on the responsibility for that property and can say, hey, we've got a problem here, you show up, as a designated agent of the owner, I would be okay with it not having to be necessarily the proper, the owner actually on site.
Sure.
Just for, I had not considered that situation until he came and brought it. Thank you for bringing that up. Because I think there are people that are deployed military, and I wouldn't want to go at my home either, especially when it's going to be just, not necessarily very long deployment. I'd want to come back to my own house. So that would be my suggestion for a modification to the owner occupied portion of that.
So Councilmember Ekstrom, would you then say those who apply for a license would have to have a certification from the management company that they would be 24 hours, 7 days a week?
Yes.
That'd be a qualification to get
A license to do it. Yeah, so that there's somebody accountable that's local.
with an understanding if that didn't occur, the license could be revoked.
Yes. That seems reasonable to me.
Any comments from Councilmember Ekstrom's input? Mr. Call?
I think Scott and I have the same comment, which is Utah defines what owner occupancy means.
Okay.
And it typically requires you to live in the home for 180 days a year. And basically it's where you vote, where your cars are registered. And so I'm not sure how that impacts Mr. Ash's situation. But it does mean that someone who, was a snowbird and went to St. George for the summer, for the winter. I guess you could do it opposite. What would that be called? I don't know.
The Sandberg.
Sandbird.
Sunbird.
But they could in theory lease their or short-term rent their property while they're out of town. In fact, they could swap, right?
Right.
Well, no, one would have to be their official residence where they would vote. But yeah, so I'm not sure how it works with the military. That might cover that.
Okay.
It is while they're deployed. It is.
It is still there.
Residents, yeah.
Real
He
official
indicated he's
resident.
being deployed. I think he's employed by the
Works for the military.
military.
To clarify,
That doesn't,
I work for the military. I will be on military orders. An emergency essential employee in Japan. I will pay taxes here. I will return here.
So are you being deployed?
No,
It's not.
Thank you.
I'm not a soldier.
but that's
Okay,
kind of a
thank you.
non-issue.
All right.
Doesn't affect.
So John has defined what a residence is, which I believe is the same for tax purposes. It's where you spend the majority of your time. So 6 months and 1 day would qualify you. Councilmember Swan.
John, in this circumstance, and you may not be able to, and the gentleman that's going to Japan, right?
Correct.
If he long-term leased it while he was gone, not suggesting that you do that, but just a clarification here. If he long-term leased it, that would still be, for voting purposes, would still be considered his primary residence. Is that correct? Is that how that works for US citizens that were overseas?
I don't know all the nuances of that. I haven't
Okay.
researched that specific question. So typically, like, we would typically rely on where are you registered to vote to help us decide if you're occupying the home. But Utah does have a thing when you're talking owner occupancy with structures, that there's this 180 days.
Okay.
So it's not just solely tax purposes or solely voting purposes, but it seems to require some
Actual-
sort of
actual
physical
okay.
occupancy as well, which is where you have to kind of dance around.
So council, would you like to consider Councilmember Ekstrom's input? Councilmember Barker?
Yeah, so I came in tonight, I had my own perception of short-term rentals and I thought this was a good ordinance. Then we heard people that said they like to take care of their property and like the Hammers, they live in Pleasant View, but there won't be owner occupied, but they can be on the property in 5 minutes if needed. I am of the opinion that maybe instead of, somebody has to be available within an hour. I know HOAs, you can ban them.
Our HOA is going to ban.
Yeah, so HOAs can ban them.
He said that at the council meeting they were last at.
Yes. HOAs have more power that if they don't, they can ban them. So I'm of the opinion that we just say someone's got to be available within an hour. 24 hours a day.
Okay. So is there a motion to amend the resolution as has been presented? We have a motion.
I'll make a motion to amend. Tell me what I'm amending.
Instead of requiring.
So instead of banning outright or requiring owner occupancy, that we would
Either
like
owner
to see.
occupancy or someone available, either the owner or a rental company that would be available within 1 hour.
What I'm hearing from Councilmember Barker is that we would do away with the owner occupancy piece. That it could be owner occupancy or a management. Okay, so an
owner
or,
occupied will be available within an hour.
yeah, they certainly, well, you'd hope so, unless they're sleeping really, really hard.
I'd say either or.
Then I'll make that motion. Then what's the ordinance number?
Yeah, I have it as, I believe, 2022-28.
Mayor, I'd move then that we would approve ordinance 2022-28, removing the any ban of short-term rentals in any part of the city and requiring either owner occupancy or a management company that is available within an hour's time.
The violation being revoked.
With the violation being the revocation of the license. And John, as far as any penalties that would be affixed, is that set by the state or can we do that ourselves?
We can set those ourselves.
Council, I'd recommend that the penalty, the financial penalty for violating would be stiff. 500 first offense, 1,000 second offense. To make it clear that we're serious and that violations won't be tolerated. However, we do have to also recognize that we have limited staff. And as with all ordinances that we pass, enforcement will be done as best we possibly can.
All right, Councilmember Swanson has made.
Clear as mud.
So
I second.
Have a second.
Hold on one second.
by
Let's
Councilmember
get it
Dalpan.
worked out here for you all.
Okay, so yeah, we have a motion and a second to amend, so now you can do your magical stuff down there.
We have
And
eight
just a
children.
reminder for those who do have an HOA that are concerned about that, should approach their HOA. Deal with that.
So here's the amendment. This was amending the ordinance that Scott prepared for Phil's suggestions, which is within all owner occupied. So short-term rentals are only permitted within all owner occupied residential structures or those managed by an individual or company who can respond within 1 hour.
John, I think that was the
24/7.
owner. Yeah, I think that was with the owner available within an hour.
That wouldn't work for the Mr.
No,
Ashes.
Well, he could use it, he could use the management company.
could it be
Right.
any designated agent? I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be a management company, but
Once again, I think the priority would be frankly, in my mind, if the owner is
well, the owner
available.
there, yeah, of course.
But if not, they can use a management company that would sign that certification that they're available 24/7 and can be at the property within an hour. I think that solves the problem.
There you go.
So it would say, or those managed by an owner or management company who can respond within 1 hour.
7 days a week.
24/7.
Trying to think.
That should, within an hour.
I'm trying to, I don't want to say
He's-
7 days a week.
He's working on it there.
At any
Put 1
time.
hour.
At
notice.
any time.
There you go.
And then the penalty is any violation shall result in a revocation of the permit, along with a minimum fine of 500 for the first offense and 1,000 for the second offense.
So what would be a second offense, for instance, because you revoked the license initially. So are you saying if they own two?
If they own two, or as
They
we
might
have
go
seen,
against it
we
without
have,
a second time.
Having the license.
Yes. they
we
might have
revoke
it.
their license and they keep it on the Airbnb and they rent it out anyway,
Right.
as some are doing already, right?
Any further comments? The ordinance is before you. It is ordinance 2022-28 as amended. Do we have a motion? Now with those additional.
Oh, okay. Mayor, I move that we approve ordinance number 2022-28 as amended.
Okay, second to that motion.
Second.
Second by Councilmember Swanson. Any further discussion? Do a roll call vote on this. Councilmember Swanson,
Yes.
Councilmember Ekstrom,
Yes.
Councilmember Dalpas,
Yes.
Councilmember Barker.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. Okay. We'll move on to item number 13, which is a ordinance to approve the meeting schedule for the 2023 fiscal year, or calendar year, I guess, actually. Just had a chance to review that. Okay, I would seek a motion then to approve ordinance 2022-29 as indicated on the screen here.
Mayor, I motion that we approve ordinance 2022-29, which is our 2023 meeting schedule.
Thank you. Do we have a second to that motion?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Ekstrom. Is there any further discussion? Okay, all in favor of the motion? Well, I'll do a roll call vote since this is an ordinance. Councilmember Barker,
Yes.
Councilmember Swanson,
Yes.
Councilmember Dow,
Yes.
Councilmember Ekstrom.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. We'll now move on to our council department reports. Councilmember Severing, I've got to let council and those present and online, the Councilmember Brennan is asked to be excused this evening. He's asked, I think, Councilmember Barker to give his report. Councilmember Barker.
Yeah, so here's an update from Chief Quinney. Says police department will be delivering stuff for Santa next week. They're helping 9 families with Christmas this year. This is the most they've ever done. And thanks to everyone who's donated to the cause. And also, even though it's not in here, they did do shop with the cop with the fraternal hero. Shop with the hero. Is that what it? I can't remember.
So
They include more than just police officers.
Yeah, please. They invited the fire department to come with them as well. So
Oh, so not hero. I'm just
I
kidding.
know. Everybody's heroes. You know. But that was last Saturday, and so if you saw those police cars and the fire trucks and helicopters, they were driving down our streets. But that was with the county, not just North Ogden. So they've done a lot of good so far this year. Further reminder of winter parking from November 15th through March 15th. You cannot park on city streets between midnight and 6 a.m. or anytime during a snowstorm or within 24 hours following the snowstorm. So no parking on the streets today. And it's time to renew dog licenses. This is very important so that we can get pets back to their owners. They pick up several dogs every week that are not licensed or not wearing collars. And they take them to the shelter and sometimes they don't never make it back to their homes. So make sure you're licensing your pets. And then car thefts are on the rise. Don't leave your car running unattended. And snow is here, so make sure your vehicle's prepared for winter driving.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Barker. Councilmember Ekstrom, do you have anything you'd like to report to us this evening?
Sure.
You see.
You see what Public Works is busy up to as the precipitation falls down and accumulates on the ground. They have been busy out plowing the roads and they have been working their tails off. We're very grateful for them. Dave Espinoza also reminded everybody to not park on the street. It's like, please don't park on the street.
That's important. Having been
Yeah.
out with the snowplow folks,
Yeah.
it makes their job much harder.
So much harder and more time. They can't get through it all.
Mr. Cole, did you have a comment?
I was gonna say, and the other thing that will happen, our insurance company will deny the claim of an illegally parked car that's hit by a snowplow. So
So there you
it's
go.
important.
Interesting.
We're gonna start towing those things.
We'll tow them. We let police know if they've been warned, they'll get towed.
All right, and then there's just a reminder about the North Pole celebration across the street. It's across the street from me. It's at Barker Park from December 20th to 23rd, starting at 5:30 p.m.
Thank you for the reminder to compliment Parks and Recreation and Public Works for the lighting ceremony. A lot of work went into that. And Santa Claus is there. So Councilmember Swanson, if you want to go visiting, there on Saturday afternoon.
Yeah, they have security that won't let me near him.
I understand that. Okay. We'll move on then to your finance report then, Councilmember Swanson.
Thanks, Mayor. It's an abbreviated report because we're early in the month and we haven't yet received our sales tax information. And so 42% of the year has lapsed at this point. Our overall expenditures are 37.9%. So we're doing well at keeping our expenditures down. Our utility funds are still on budget from both a revenue and an expenditure standpoint. Building fees are making a rebound, ostensibly because of Prominence Point. In October, you'll remember that it was reported that building fees were down 8% over prior year. With the pulling of permits for Prominence Point, we are now only 4.6% down over prior year. We have an audit committee meeting this Thursday in 2 days at 6 p.m. And we'll review the draft audit at that meeting, although it does not have the auditor's opinion at this point. It's just the draft audit.
Yeah, we could do what they did at Associated Foods one year. Because they printed the report, had the signature, and decided just to use the your signature and print the report anyway, without the auditor's approval. So I guess it's.
I would not recommend that.
I think we've been through enough headaches with audit over recent years. We'll stick to doing it right.
And you brought up two issues that I would just further expand upon. Scott and John and myself reviewed the plans for Providence Point earlier this evening. As a reminder, the mayor and the director of planning can approve that. I would say there's very few things, and Scott's made note of those, to get back to them, but we're not in total alignment with what was approved by the council. So he'll be working on those, and which included, by the way, the clubhouse plans that have been submitted. So they are getting serious about moving forward. And then I would also say, in regards to last year's operations and the audit and the preliminary review, I would just say that the objectives that we have as a council to plan for the future growth in the city and to meet the known commitments that are outstanding were met. And so I think we're online to meet our goals and objectives without a hyper reactionary situation. Staying calm and collected and moving forward. So, not to say there weren't any hyper reactionary comments, but those come anyway. Thank you for those reports. We'll now move on to item 15, which is additional public comment. Once again, just a reminder, if you would limit your comments to 5 minutes, state your name, and if you're a resident of North Ogden, we'll proceed.
Stephanie Casey, 2444 Barker Parkway. I have a couple of things. First, I'd like to thank Tessa for her presentation. I made that arrangement. I wanted to, have us have that discussion. And I actually asked that she would talk about that based on, the shows that we've had there and discussions that I hear coming from council when the amphitheater is discussed. One thing I'd like to make note is you mentioned what would be more comparable to ours is their infancy. I'd like to make note that in their infancy in 1979, they did not have an amphitheater. They started by building, and they built the amphitheater 15 years later. So we're kind of at that point where we need to, I'd like to hear a plan, something that'd be great. And then one other thought was, I hear comments and discussions about property rights, and I think that's really important. I'd also like to hear the property rights of existing homeowners brought into the discussion, maybe. I have to remind Sean of that every year when he wants to build a motocross track, that our property rights only go so far. We are held to zoning and infringing on our neighbors. Thank you.
No, you can't have a motorcycle track in your backyard.
Why? For the regular next scheduled meeting. As electric motorcycles are quite quiet.
It's the screaming when you crash.
Chris Pulver, North Ogden, just clarification on the subcommittee I was voted onto. Councilman Swanson basically said that those meetings will be recorded. I think we said they weren't gonna be.
Well, we won't have a recorder there. We will have the YouTube going so that it's
Okay.
just,
So technically at an official meeting, I think was the determination.
well, an official meeting has to be noticed and it has to have minutes,
Okay.
and we won't have to do those
Okay,
things.
yeah, Doug just wanted clarification on that. And then the other thing was, the training, they mentioned something about that.
Mhm.
Is that at the next audit committee meeting or is that some?
No, we're going to set a time here. That'll be probably the first week of January.
Okay, all right.
Councilman Swanson
Yes,
will
sir.
also be getting a description of the committee's responsibilities
Yeah.
and how they'll interface so that there's no misunderstanding as we move forward on what their responsibilities are and expectations. So he's committed to do that. So we'll also get that to you as part of the meeting and that thing. So,
Cool.
okay, thank you. Any other comments? Now would be the time.
Danny Cochran with Ogden. So, during the B and B discussion, you said that during the planning commission discussion of this, they brought the officer in and he said that there hadn't been any complaints about existing Airbnbs. And part of the reason there haven't been, I know specifically for my community, it's because we're private streets and nobody calls the police about anything. So that's why they don't have any record of complaints, because I know more than a few of my neighbors have had complaints. And go ahead.
I would encourage them to call because even though you have private streets, you're still paying property taxes which support the police department. So if your neighbors feel like they can't call because it's a private street, I would encourage you to let them know that they're always welcome to call if they have an issue, whether it's regarding Airbnbs or other issues. We want to make
Yeah,
sure-
I think if it was something serious, they would, but
Any issue is the
I would
police
say
are
that's
there
pretty
for them.
serious, somebody knocking on your door.
that's scary.
That's not unlike Legacy over here. They're all private streets, but the fire and police cover and
So,
protect
let
them
know
regardless
They should call.
for any issue.
I would do that. Thank
All
you.
right.
And then one other question I had was, so how is the public gonna know who to contact if there's an issue with this Airbnb right here? There's someone's supposed to respond within 1 hour.
That's to a police. So you need to call the non-emergency police unless it is an emergency, then it's a 911 call. It's when the police get there and knock on the door. That
The police will
needs to-
contact.
needs to
Right.
show up.
It'll be on record that they have access to.
I'm sorry to jump in.
Yeah, okay, I didn't understand.
$250 fine.
Only,
First time. First time.
No
That's
more.
all.
500 next time.
Thanks,
Take
Dan.
down my phone.
That's why if you want us to take it out.
I'll set my own timer too, so I'm not too long-winded for you. Alex Kraft, Harrisville resident, but I'm very interested in topic number 12, the short-term rental piece of it. I will say as a side note too, a couple of things, this is going on record. I tell council member Severing I was disappointed not to see him. I'm an alumni of Fremont. I wanted to get a chance to see him again. So there's that piece of it, but the flash vote piece too that I've talked about at the beginning, there are other solutions that I know of personally that can help with city and county engagement, public opinion, and other solutions like that, and platforms if you'd like to know. That's part of my profession, what I do, so I'm happy to help there. Not to knock on the presentation that was given or anything, but there are options and things available. In terms of the short-term rental piece though, I think honestly what's been discussed for the regulation is the idea that I came here with, of being able to communicate with the people who own or the property managers who are managing the properties. That's the easiest way to try and help solve this issue in my mind. As an owner of property like that nearby, so I can get here quickly. That's why we don't have one in St. George or other areas, and to be able to provide similar to Mrs. Hammer's situation, a place for local family, friends, other people to stay when they come into town. And so being able to be the one that they communicate with and contact, I'd be more than happy to do that. I have a very invested interest in the state of the property, the guests who are there, the relationship with the neighbors, the community that it's in, the amenities that are being used. So I think that's a great resolution regulation, and I'd be more than happy. Neighbors have problems or have had issues, because those are definitely scary concerns, scary things to happen. Be the one to communicate with me so I can help that, because in those situations, it sounds like maybe there was poor communication from the host in that situation to who was renting on where to go and how to access it. And then also when there are issues from a neighbor directly with the guest to the actual host again, who might be managing the property. So I think that's a good solution. Like I mentioned, being invested in the property is a big piece of why those short-term rentals succeed, I think, because the owners of them are the ones who have to pay HOA fees if they're applicable. They're the ones that are paying for those same type of services to make sure that it is kept well. To the point made about a long-term rental situation for a home, when he's gone, we get to check up on ours on about a weekly basis to make sure things are still kept in order, nothing's been damaged, nothing's been stolen, there haven't been any issues. So I think the short-term piece lends a better maintenance policy for doing that than just a situation where you've got bad neighbors that are peeing in your fountain, they're letting their dogs run all over the place, and they're there for however long that they're going to be there until you get maybe more issues or more cops involved or something like that. So to the con of having multiple people in, there's also a pro to that fact, I think. And then also looking at the value that it brings to North Ogden. I've had a lot of guests talk about not thinking about staying here before, but having that option of a place where their whole family can stay together. They can stay in a quiet neighborhood, a place that's away and kind of off the beaten path of downtown Ogden and other areas. So they can experience what North Ogden has to offer. They can frequent the businesses around here. We give recommendations of local places. They can go and check out, they can order food, they can experience and see why we love living here so much in the community, within the county, everything else. And I think it meets demand better than having the owner occupied situation, because oftentimes people who are moving from out of state, they're coming for tournaments, they're coming for church events, weddings, funerals, whatever it might be. And then the outdoor scene need more space, need a place to stay. It would be better than some owner occupied additional bedroom or something like that. I've stayed at several Airbnbs across the world in my time traveling, and having that extra space, I think is another reason why I like the regulation that was put before the group tonight. And then with the cost of living thing, that's obviously a big concern. I got plenty of friends and family members trying to get into their own places. My argument for that point would be if someone wasn't able to afford the mortgage, they're not likely going to be able to afford the long-term rent anyway that it would cost, because rent rates have gone up. And so I agree with the point that we don't want to be stealing or taking away from those people who are looking for housing in the area. But just like Mrs. Hammer's situation, others who have come and stayed at the place, that it helps provide them a temporary kind of in between, so they can get to a house that's being built or somewhere else they're moving, or they're transitioning across the country and they need to stop and use that. The last point I think was made, just that I am in need, or I am in favor of the regulations put forth. I think it adds benefit to the community. It adds accountability, which I do think might have been lacking in that communication gap, but will be needed to maintain better expectations for something like this moving forward. And again, more than happy as one who would be an owner and a host to provide that and be open and transparent and communicate with people.
Thank you. John, I believe there's someone online you said would like to comment.
Yes, Jeanette Sweet has a comment.
Okay. Jeanette, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. And please don't misunderstand the quiver in my voice. It's a long-term COVID thing that still sticks with me. So regards to what the gentleman that was just up at the mic said, I agree with everything that that man said. And the ordinance that we have had in place since, at least since I started dealing with this in October of 2020, trying to understand this illegal Airbnb next to me, one of the big issues is the difference between a short-term rental and a long-term rental. The last I knew in that ordinance, a short-term rental was for somebody to stay there for 30 days or less. And that was not the case. So that goes to the enforcement issue again. And that needs to be identified. And in addition to that, who stays there? The gentleman next door was renting out every bedroom in his house to different people, not affiliated in any way. And it was my understanding that that's not the intent. It's for essentially one reservation, people who are affiliated in some way, either by family members or by relationships. Say my daughter wanted to come to here to have a weekend away with her friends, something like that. And that it is one reservation only. And if you're going to have the non-owner occupied, I agree with that. That's fine. But then are they renting out just one room, the whole house? Are they allowed to rent out every room in the house? No, my understanding of the ordinance as it is that it is one reservations for that location. And that was unenforceable. When it comes to the business license, is there any way, or I would pose the suggestion that when somebody receives the business license or the permit to run a short-term rental, that an inspection be required? The ordinance as written says that if there are renovations done specifically for an area to be determined as an Airbnb or short-term rental, that there has to be an inspection. That again was not enforced. The business license was issued without that inspection. And then as far as the compliance issue, I know we're short-staffed. And I understand that because I was dealing with this from October of 2020 clear through till just a couple of months ago. And nothing was done that ceased the operations in that Airbnb. It was just simply that the man's not going to comply. The fines were already listed in there, that these were the consequences for not adhering to the ordinance. And those fines were never instituted. And so I am very concerned about the recognition and the enforcement of this if we're going to allow it to happen. If they comply, I'm fine with that. Even with the non-owner occupied, I'm fine with that. But to allow people to rent every room, in fact, you can go on this gentleman's, and John Call's fully aware of who I'm talking about, and you can go onto the Airbnb website and see the comments stated there by people who stayed in the residence, saying that they expected that they would have that designated B&B area to themselves, only to find that they were sharing it with people and strangers they didn't even know. And so those are some of the concerns that I have. 2 years to try and get this addressed and it still wasn't addressed is far too long. There needs to be some sense of urgency on it. I understand we're short-staffed, but we've got to be able to enforce these regulations or the ordinance is worthless. And it lands on the shoulders of us as residents to inform you of it, because I know that there have been, Scott mentioned that they had rolled back some of the rules that you can't look at the VRBO sites or the Airbnb sites to take action. But when you also talk about the police department complaints, it's not just the police department. I called and talked to so many people over the past 2 years trying to get this addressed. The complaints are in the office themselves. Count those in too, please. Other than that, I think the ordinance is fairly well written. It just needs to be enforced. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else online, John?
No.
Anyone else would like to make a comment this evening?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank the council again for consideration of what I brought tonight. And agree with everybody else that I think it's a better ordinance at this point. Totally agree with what was just said about inspections. I wouldn't care if I had an initial one. I wouldn't care if I had an annual one. I'd comply. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It's important for the safety of our residents. It's important for maintaining of our city and zoning and everything else. So I'm not opposed to any of that. And if it goes further to amend that in, I would support that.
Would you please restate your name and city of
Oh,
residence?
yes, sorry. Scott Ash, North Ogden.
Thank you.
Fire Marshal Barker has been making those inspections as part of the business license.
Perfect.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that will continue.
that's, so that's my comment, and again, just, appreciate that, that consideration, so, thank you.
Thank you.
Clint Willis, North Ogden. I feel like I need to clear my name with Philip because he mentioned to you guys that I had been caught in this whole thing when I wasn't caught. I came in here after going through the process the city led me to. So if I hadn't have done that, this wouldn't even be an issue. I'd still have a fence up there. You guys wouldn't know about it, right? It makes me sound like the bad guy here. So I didn't get caught. I came in trying to see if I could purchase something that I already got led to by the city. You know, I come in here and get guided a certain way and they failed me. Did they not? Did I take the wrong process by coming in the front door here? What else do I do? They led me to where I am now. And now I've got to go spend tons of money, rip the fence out, reroute it, you know, trying to do the right thing here. So as far as that goes, I don't feel like this is a real just thing. So is there any other options? Can we lease it? Can we get an easement? Is there any other options? I mean, I maintain the sidewalk up there. I sweep it off so SWIP doesn't come up, and you got road base that washes down into the storm drain right there. Have you guys seen that? You aware of that? I pull weeds all over there. So that's all gonna end. I plowed the sidewalk all the way to the corner. I clear up for the mailboxes. I mean, I do a lot in the community up there, and here I am being like stepped on. Just give me something.
I don't think you're gonna get an answer on that tonight, Clint, but I do appreciate you coming in, stating your concerns. I believe what you're referring to, just want to clarify, is that you were asked to get a land use permit for the fence.
Yeah, like a couple months ago.
So,
And I did. I applied for it.
yeah, I think that's what kind of,
That's what brought this.
that's what brought this issue to a head, is asking you to get a permit, land use permit for the fence. So, but thank you. And surely, I think that can be brought back by anybody that voted against it. So.
We didn't vote.
Well,
Yeah,
it is-
anybody can bring it back
Yeah.
because it wasn't voted on.
Yeah, so feel free to make contact and see if you can talk to someone else into bringing it back.
Well, what's the process of making the contact at this point?
You just have to get with the council member, correct me if I'm wrong, John. Ask them to put it on the agenda for a readdress.
Yep. Okay, we'll go from there.
Okay,
Thanks, guys.
thank you. Any other comments this evening? All right, seeing none, John, if it's not online. See any online?
Let's see, just double checking. Jeanette Sweet, I think raised her hand again.
I don't know how that works.
Just one real quick comment on the,
5 minutes.
can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm just asking John if you can do this by getting to 5 minutes.
It's up to the council.
It's just one quick statement.
Okay, go ahead, Janet.
You mentioned the inspections, and I think that there may be a disconnect between what the city council understands and what is actually taking place, because there was no inspection next to my place in 2 years. So I would encourage you guys to make sure that that linkage is there, because if you say there's somebody's handling the inspections, but there was no inspection.
Okay.
That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you. Staff, any comments for the comments this evening? Susan?
Just a reminder, this is our only meeting this month.
Okay. Mr. Call, do you have anything to add this evening?
Just one thing, the youth city council has gotten smaller in recent years, and they have been our primary. Shorter? Yes, shorter in numbers and in stature. No, But they've been our primary source for volunteers at the Santa House during Santa hours, because Santa needs a helper there with him. And so I know that our advisor's been working hard, but if any of you have any availability on Mondays evenings or Saturday afternoons, we can put you in touch with the advisor to maybe help fill some of that gap. Those kids, they get stretched pretty thin at Christmas time, so.
John, I'd appreciate it if you could work that out, because my communication with the advisor has not been rated high according to the advisor. That's my wife. Okay, Scott?
Our former employee and friend Brandon Bell is setting up a training with Utah Land Use Institute, and he's going to be inviting multiple cities to that. So land use training after the first of the year, January. It's looking like Thursday, January 19th in the evening. I realize that's off of your standard schedule, but if it's something you would be able to attend, I think it'll be worthwhile, and we'll share those details up and get them out to Council and Planning Commission when we know more.
You? Council, any additional comments this evening? Councilmember Dalpas?
When we're talking about the short-term rentals, I was gonna ask John if he could maybe send out a communication to everyone that currently has a business license for short-term rentals, notifying them of this ordinance and how it currently reads. And that will hopefully at least try to keep them in the loop. Obviously, there are several short-term rentals that aren't done with business licenses, but let's connect with ones that we do know of, so they're fully aware of what's going on.
Okay, and additionally, if it's brought to our attention, since there's no fine for the initial contact, if we're aware of others, I guess, or residents come in, we extend that same consideration.
Yep.
Okay, anything else? Councilmember Barker?
Yeah, since we want clarification, so we did, I think our city standard has just changed regarding business license inspection, so I just started inspecting ADUs, and I have not done a short-term rental yet, but all in the last couple of months.
So,
And is it state law or?
one of the issues that's part of the confusion for all of this is the city tried to pass a short-term rental ordinance in 2018, and it wasn't passed. So this is actually technically the first short-term rental that the city has, except there was a prohibition on short-term rentals in ADUs. That was the only prohibition we had. So these questions about what was enforced or what wasn't enforced, there technically wasn't an inspection required for short-term rental. It's what was proposed in the language in 2018, but it wasn't passed. So anyways, that is something we are doing now, is accessory dwelling units are required to have inspections, and so.
Along with short-term rentals now, right? To get a business license.
I'm not-
Part of the process.
I'm not very busy, so.
I know that. We surely understand that. Any other comments from the council this evening? No comments from the mayor this evening, other than to wish the council happy holidays. May you enjoy that time and make the best use of it, and wishing the same to our citizens. We appreciate your input, and we look forward to a very prosperous new year as we start the budgeting process. Coming up right after the first of the year, so
Joy.
appreciate the input.
I just said joy.
Yes, it does so. All right, I'm looking for a